I didn't hear Shane.
And I do not see Shane.
Well, he turned his video off. Can't hear you, Shane, for some reason.
Oh, is this workshop on our YouTube channel?
Yes, and TV.
What is that station on TV? BTES?
B16, BTN 16, and then Charter 192 or 197, somewhere up in that neighborhood. All right, thanks. See, just text me or.
All right, we're going to call this work session to order. To start it off with, Counselor, you have something you need to say to make it official and legal.
Thank you, Chairman. As you guys all know, Governor Lee has, by executive order, suspended the provisions of the Open Meetings Act to the extent necessary to allow governing bodies such as this to meet electronically rather than being required to gather a quorum physically in the same location. One condition of meeting electronically is that if a member of staff or council is attending by audio only, that is, there isn't video that will show who's speaking, you are asked to identify yourself by name and position when you speak. In order to proceed with meeting electronically, the Planning Commission should make a determination that meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19. At this time, if there's any discussion that the members would like to have about this, there would be time to do so. Otherwise, a motion and a second and a roll call vote would be appropriate, and then we will continue meeting electronically if that's the will of the Planning Commission.
Is there a motion to meet electronically?
So moved. Make a motion to meet electronically for this session of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there a second?
This is Kevin.
Kevin has the second. Joel, if you'd call the roll, please.
Kelly Graham.
Yes.
Balin Luttrell.
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer.
Yes.
Kevin Buck.
Yes.
Scott Gaynor.
Yes.
Takai Shu.
Yes.
Mark Webb.
Yes.
And Margaret Fire Robin is not here.
I am here. I arrived.
Oh,
Apologies. You can mark me here now.
is that a yes?
Yes, that's a yes. That's a yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Counselor, are we good to go now?
Yes, up
Do
for
Do we
discussion.
need to do a roll call?
No, that's good enough. Your roll call for the vote got everybody there.
Okay. Then I'll mark that one off.
Up for discussion in this work session is the RE district looking at the regulations and how to further clarify the regulations. With that, I'll let Sheriff Young give you all a presentation, and there'll be a lot of questions and answers for you all to see where we can get on the majority of people. So if we choose to change the regulations, we'll know what to craft. She will have some proposed, like number one here, look at this, see if you like it. Number two, do you like this regulation this way? Please, it's really an open discussion for all the members. So with that, Sheriff.
Before you go there, for clarification, there will be no motions and seconds on the discussions since this is a work session.
That's correct. It can be motions and seconds, but really what I want to do is, and Sheriff, is gauge everybody. So there might be, how do you feel about this, Joel? How do you feel about this, Jason? So we can gauge where the majority of the members are on the items. So it will be more of a informal, how do you feel about this? We're not asking for any actions to be taken tonight. So we can craft a reg that you all could take action on to hopefully present at the next Planning Commission meeting, if that makes sense. All right, Sheriff.
All right. Hey, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well tonight. So like Tim said, we're going to just try to dive back into this. The discussion at the last meeting was a good, lively discussion of this RE district issue. So what we're going to try to do tonight is walk back through those kind of 4 main themes or 4 screens that we looked at last time, and where last time we gave you some general options from A, B, C, D. This time I've went back and listened to the recording of the discussion last month and tried to narrow down based on kind of what I was hearing. And of course, not everybody was in agreement on every piece of it, but at least provide some further thought through options to get your response tonight. So what we'll do is, if you wouldn't mind, Tim, to jump to the next screen. We'll just kind of start back through these, and this is not the end all be all. So if you say, hey, wait a minute, I had a great idea on this topic, then by all means, let's talk about it. But what I've tried to do is keep in italics. This one's at the top of the screen. I moved it around a little bit from screen to screen, but the existing section of the zoning ordinance, so you can compare to what's on the books today. So that's the existing section at the top. Under the line identifies the problem that we presented last month during our discussion. So this is that purpose preamble section that begins the RE district, where it talks about, we talked about it, it's descriptive, but some of the terms in this section we feel are hard to pin down or hard to describe from the regulatory side of things. So we talked a lot about this during the last discussion, that some of these terms leave staff with no guidance when it comes to implementing the regulations. So based on kind of the options from do nothing to scrap the whole thing, these 2 items on the screen seem to be where at least some of the planning commissioners were leaning during that discussion. So the first option is to just really streamline that paragraph and to take out any of the terms that could be seen as vague or hard to determine. So it would read, if you look at number 1, streamline the paragraph. Streamline the paragraph is the option here. How do you feel about just saying the purpose of the established residential neighborhood district is to provide lot development standards for single family and single family duplex neighborhoods which were developed prior to 1950. This will make existing homes compliant with the zoning ordinance and will promote new construction and additions to existing residences. It's just straightforward terms that we can all, kind of more black and white terms, and it takes out some of those items such as existing patterns, character, and then the way that paragraph ends in a manner consistent with the existing neighborhood just gets a little bit hard to interpret. So that's the first option with this issue. The second is to leave that paragraph in there. Maybe you like it the way it is, and then to just go in and start trying to add some definitions. And some of these, they get they get a little difficult at times to define, but I think we can do it with what's listed below number 2 in red. So we add a definition for existing streetscape pattern to say the general appearance and configuration of many buildings which define the street. This includes the view along the streets and how the buildings complement and reinforce one another through their placement, height, and rhythm of their facades. That again, it can be open to some interpretation, probably between me and you and different members of the public, but it does at least put some more description in the zoning ordinance to help us regulate. And then the second definition is character. So those individual qualities of building sites and districts that differentiate and distinguish them from other building sites and districts. And again, you could probably find many a definition of character out there, but this would be just an option if y'all want to go this route, and we can continue to look for different or better definitions, but wanted to kind of put a little bit more out there for y'all to look at on this purpose topic. So does either one of these options strike anyone as better or ideal as far as the purpose clause goes?
I have a question, Sheriff. The purpose just tells what we're getting into, correct? I mean, should we not be so specific in a purpose statement, but then as we get into the meat of the reg, come into the specifics of it? Is that what we're trying to achieve?
Well, to me, and I might get Danielle to weigh in if I'm thinking about this or hearing her right, but I mean, I think the purpose sets up a general overview of what that district is set up to do.
Yeah, but it didn't have to be that specific, though.
I don't think it has to be so
Yeah,
specific, but
general.
I think that in the absence of, later on, in the absence of any kind of clear regulations, obviously you can refer back to the purpose. So if you have a purpose that is not well-defined or clear, it can create issues.
I just think of a purpose maybe being the introduction into the whole thing, and then you get specific as you read into it.
So Mark, you're saying like the streamlined paragraph, but then then you would talk about the streetscape or character or something.
Yeah, I would maybe, if there's any questionable wording in there, don't have it in the purpose statement.
And that's
And
what
that's
I would
what
agree.
number one gets to, I think.
I would agree with what Commissioner Webb is saying. And, I look back at the other districts. The R1 district has a one sentence introductory statement. There's not even a purpose and applicability subsection for R1 or R2 or any of the other districts. And the R1 district introduction statement says this zone is primarily to accommodate single family dwelling units at a maximum density of 3 units per acre. And then pretty much mirrors the same thing on R2. So I'm kind of that's been my line of thinking all along, is to take some of the subjectivity out. And then, as Commissioner Webb said, define what we want to define as we move along through that district zoning language. But I think the ambiguity of what's there now is what's put us in the posture we're in currently. I agree that the purpose statement is actually a mission statement for this section, and should be as simple as possible, just saying what we're setting out to accomplish by the following regulations. And to that end, what was it that happened in 1950?
And that's the adoption of the zoning ordinance, I believe.
Why can't let's say that rather than 1950? Because most folks reading this are not going to know that.
True. And Sheriff, I'm guessing that's the date. That's the significance of 1950.
Right.
Yeah, let's say that.
Or put both in 1950 on the occasion of the adoption of.
Yes. Right, the way it now is that could just be an arbitrary timeline, and we have come to learn that anything we say is going to be used against us.
Right.
So if one of these houses was built in 1951, man.
I'll double check. I know it's the 50s, but it might be 51 or 53. But regardless,
let's just say as well that developed prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance, and whenever that was. I think one of the references to 1950, just from my reading, was to try to demarcate the RE zone from an R1 zone or an R2 zone. And so I don't know exactly when we would want to define that, but I think there has to be something that sets aside the fact that RE is different. So I was looking at this and I thought, this zone is primarily to accommodate single family and single family duplex dwellings in neighborhoods which were developed prior to 1950. That prior to, or that last 3 or 4 words obviously is open to, I'm not picky about that or really anything for that matter, but that language, and the purpose of the established residential neighborhood district, even that sentence does not, you don't find that in any of the other district definitions or opening statements. So maybe if you just strike that out and say this zone is primarily to accommodate, and if you use those words, then that mirrors what's in the R1, the R2, and all the way throughout the different residential districts. So it will be uniform.
So what I've heard, KB and few of y'all, is to cut a little bit, change the wording of the streamline, but in general, you'd like to streamline it similar to what's in the R1, R2 type, R1A type districts.
I think mirroring is good, but you could mirror go in that direction, or whether we need to go back to all the other zones and say the purpose of or whatever. So
does anybody, I guess the question, and Margaret, let me ask you first, since you were just speaking. Do you feel like the streamline is the best way to go here?
Well, I think we're getting hung up on the word purpose. I mean, if you go look at each one of these, it says this zone is primarily to accommodate blah, blah, blah. I mean, if you just put the purpose of this zone is primarily to accommodate, it's the same. It's just the words, the purpose. I mean, that's what it sounds like to me that everybody's getting hung up on.
right. So we
I don't see any, I mean, you could say this established residential neighborhood is to provide specific, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just those 2 words. So
I don't think I'm getting hung up on it. I just think, and if we can leave it in, it's fine. It's just to mirror what is the language for the other zones. And like Margaret said, if we want to put the word purpose in there, it just makes it read better and it flows better and it's consistent.
yeah, that's my point, is either strike it or just add it to everything. I mean, it all means the same. So,
well, this district is different than the others because this district was developed to accommodate existing development, and the others were not.
Right. So Tim, to answer your next question or whatever, my understanding from what Dr. Webb was saying was that, so once we wordsmith and finish that paragraph, that then we do include some of these definitions below, but we don't refer to them in that first paragraph, that then we move down. So Dr. Webb, is that what you were kind of saying?
Yeah, it's like a purpose statement. It tells us, it'll tell what's to follow,
Right.
We don't want to have to repeat what's in this purpose statement below. Let's just tell people what's happening, what's coming about in this purpose statement, and then we get into the specifics as you read into it.
So what's the next slide? So do we have more stuff along this line? Are we done when we do this? No, there's more, right?
There's more slides, but if I can get this one done, then we'll move to the next one. And I think that I've heard from most people, Malin, shake your head, or Takai, somebody, that if you think it's good to streamline this section. Malin, do you think so?
Yeah, I agree with that. And exactly what Dr. Webb is saying, I think makes sense. And
Kelly, you good with streamlining?
Absolutely.
Takai?
Good with it.
Okay. And Joel, up in
Yes.
the upper right on my.
Yes.
So, okay. So we'll refine that in the reg to streamline that first step. And with that, Sheriff, you can go, I can push it to the next slide, I guess.
Actually, I got a question. It's a bit of a tangent and I don't want to go too far down it, but so this says single family detached and duplex, but in the Fairmount, we have a fair number of like townhomes. How's that fit? What is that, like grandfathered or something? Or I mean, they're never allowed in again, or what?
Those are grandfathered in.
There's a couple of those that are actually zoned R3 though.
There might be some R3 in that area.
Oh, okay. All right. That might explain it then. Okay.
So we'd have to look, I know where.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, that's cool. I'll look. Thank you.
Some of
That
those
explains
around the
it.
school are R3.
Yeah.
Sorry, what?
Oh, so some of those around the school are zoned R3.
They're zoned R3. Okay, I was thinking it was the whole. Okay, that explains it. Thanks.
Getting back to the purpose statement again, should it not be simple enough that we don't have to define anything in there or worry about anything being not understood?
That's what we're going with the streamlining it, and then further defines, or not define, but spell out in the reg below the purpose statement, what specifics for that zone.
Okay.
Let me ask Danielle a question. In streamlining it, and understand why we want to do it, are we making it more difficult for you to defend if you ever need to?
What I really want you guys to focus on is what you want this ordinance to do for this neighborhood. Because if it's clear from the ordinance what you all are trying to accomplish, then it's going to be much easier to defend it, if that makes sense. And so I think what would really be key from this meeting and the follow-up meeting is, what do you actually want the next time somebody comes along and decides to put a house on an empty lot in this neighborhood? So if you guys can get to the same place on that, or the majority of you can, then I think a lot of the wordsmithing can follow from that. And because it's not really, what I really want is something where there's not going to be any questions about what Planning Commission and City Council wanted to see. It's clear from the face of the ordinance.
All right, Sheriff, the next slide there.
Okay, so these next two slides are going to deal with this setback issue. On the left side of the screen, you have the copy from the zoning ordinance today that talks about the setbacks in the RE zone. And a careful note on the left side of the screen in red is, note that right now the language regarding setbacks in A, B, and C says that front yard setbacks shall be, side yard setbacks shall be, and then the rear yard setback is 30 feet. So just keep that in mind as we talk through this. So on the issues that we've had in light of some of our current situations, the term neighborhood streetscape and setback pattern are not really clearly defined in our zoning ordinance. So to clear up this section, there are two options for y'all to consider. One is to change the terms and add definitions here. So if you recall, if anybody watched the, we're doing this for this whole district, but there was some assertion that using the word match in this section should mean that the setback, the building be placed at the setback line to match, or to match the other houses around it. So if we leave this section right under the header of setbacks in place, there might be need to consider another term if we don't mean match. Now, if y'all want it to match, then we can leave match. But if we don't mean match here, to use maybe follow or complement as a different word instead of match. that we, again, define that existing streetscape pattern. So here, the second bullet is an example definition of existing streetscape pattern, which is also what you all read on the screen prior. And then another option in here is to strike the term setback pattern. You could go ahead and define existing streetscape pattern and then just strike setback pattern, because both of those occur in that setback explanation right under the header setbacks.
Sorry, go ahead.
Another option, which is number 2, is just to revise that and strike that section that describes what setbacks are. And we've got definitions of setbacks in the definition section of the zoning ordinance that apply everywhere. So you could strike that and just say A, B, C. Front yard setbacks. The front yard setback is determined by the average front yard setback of lots within the same block and on the same side of the street. And my proposal would be to say, as identified on the east or west front building setback requirements map, which is a map that we have that staff uses to tell people what their average setback is. That's a very clear and concise something to refer to, rather than to just talk about the average front yard setback on the lots within the same block and on the same side of the street. And I've got, Tim, if you want to scroll a few slides ahead, I'll show you just real quick what these maps look like. There you go. So there are 2 maps, one for the East District, which would be Fairmount, and then one for the West, which is the Windsor Avenue area. And we showed excerpts of this with the 803 Pennsylvania Avenue case, but when a person within the Fairmount or this area calls and says, what's my front setback? Staff's going to go look at that map, because they field measured all, back in 2009, they field measured all of these houses and determined these average setbacks. So this is the tool that we're currently using to tell people what their setbacks are. So if you would incorporate reference to that map, you would have a clean and clear reference to that defined average setback for each lot.
Sure. The number 1, option 1 with the existing streetscape pattern. One of the concerns I have is, when you consider a neighborhood like an RE district, and particularly the Fairmount district, most of the homes, whether it's the front porch or the front facade or the extension of the front facade, are pretty much in line block by block. Now, there may be differences from one block to the next. Would number 1, defining existing street pattern or getting away from the use of the word setback, accommodate not allowing someone to set a dwelling further back from the street than the existing dwellings that are in that block? Because I see that as being one of the most problematic areas in the future, is if someone were to set a dwelling or build a dwelling far enough back from the street to where it doesn't match the streetscape pattern.
Well, I gotta disagree on that. I mean, maybe Tim, you can bring up a Google map of, say, Maryland Ave between Taylor and Poplar. The houses don't line up. I mean, one or two next to each other may, but if you go down that street, you'll see they don't. And that's the case on almost every street around here. They really don't all line up. To me, the problem here was minimum, right? I mean, that was, they took, the zoning board took it as exact. And to me, my solution to this would just say the minimum front yard setbacks shall be the average. The minimum side yard setbacks shall be, because that's the point, right? It was a minimum setback. It wasn't that you had to build it to 30 feet, 0 inches, or whatever it is. So.
And there's another, let her show you this next slide here, Sheriff, run over it.
Yeah. Yeah, so this one kind of gets into the topic you're talking about a little bit more, Jason, but I think that there's two issues here. And one is that again, the terms, like if you imagine yourself sitting trying to explain to a person that may or may not have ever obtained a building permit or dealt with zoning or things like that, they come into the office and you're trying to talk about existing streetscape patterns. It just gets into these definitions that are hard to, these terms that are hard to communicate, much less you don't have definitions for. So that with that previous slide, there's the issue of just taking out anything that's undefined or difficult to define or not needed if we have just set standards. So that's one issue. But then the second, to speak to the placement of a building on a lot, if you think about the setback issue, and if you look at A, you say, all right, front yard setback shall be the average front yard setback of the lots within the same block and on the same side of the street. And the front yard setback is the minimum distance allowed from the front property line to the structure. So that's going to be at the bottom of that image, that diagram there, you've got the street. So from there to the front setback line, which is noted on that diagram, that's your closest point to which you could build. And that's the way, again, that we have always interpreted that setback line. So something to consider the placement of the structure is, we talked about a build to line. So we could change this up and mandate that, you would have to build at the setback line. And that's what people refer to as that build to line. And that's what, some folks who had come to the BZA meeting felt that our ordinance was telling us to do. But again, that's not consistent with the way setback line has been interpreted here in Bristol. An option, if you look at the second A, which I apologize for that, I didn't realize it didn't go to B, but the bottom A on this screen, we could add something that talked about front yard setbacks and building placement. So maybe you say front yard setbacks are this minimum point. So it's this average front yard setback of the lots within the same block and on the same side of the street, as identified on this map that we just showed you. But then maybe you say something in terms of building placement, that the front facade of the building must be constructed within 10 feet of the setback line. So if you look at the diagram, maybe you get people, and I don't know if 10 feet is kind of to throw it out there to talk about and see how y'all feel about, but if you're interested in this concept of trying to get these houses to line up, but maybe not to the point of mandating at this setback, then maybe you provide a range where you say, hey, we acknowledge and see that there is a pattern out here. And on a setback on, the 700 block of Maryland, it's 12 feet. But maybe you give a little flexibility and say that front facade has to be within 10 feet of the setback line. So it's not as restrictive as the build to, where you must build at the setback line, but it gives a little bit of flexibility. And again, 10 feet's just throwing something out there to start chewing on. Maybe 15 feet's right. Maybe it's just something to consider.
For me, the second A or the B is right now we're getting into the part where we're actually defining the character of the neighborhood is basically what this means to me. And the character of the neighborhood being that in a city block or within a range, what I'm basically saying is when you drive down Pennsylvania Avenue or any of the streets in a BE zone, you don't want to see an empty lot and you have to wait until you're immediately in front of that lot to see that there's a home or a dwelling on that lot. And so I don't think we should have I'm not in favor of a set to line, but I am in favor of using a range, as you've described, Sheriff, of 10 or 15 feet or whatever the agreement is, to use that opportunity to set forth and define some of those character and streetscape issues that are there or need to be there, or looks to me like what the original writers wanted to do.
No, can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yes, I'll stop sharing mine. If
All
you
right.
just hold on 1 second.
All right.
We'll find my cursor going over to my other screen here.
While he's figuring that out.
Okay, you can share it now, Scott.
Okay, never mind. I'll say it in a minute.
Just hit share screen.
Yeah, I got it. Y'all see that?
Not yet.
Yeah. There we
We had a
go.
big black screen.
There you go.
All right. So, I mean,
How do we get out of this?
uh-oh.
I can't see anything. It's all blacked out.
Uh-oh. Give it a second. I can see it on my other one.
Yeah,
Can y'all see?
on mine.
I've got it.
I've got it.
I have it.
I don't.
And Mark, you're not there anymore.
Am I gone?
Yes,
Is it divisible?
you're
Uh-oh.
invisible.
Yep, Mark is divisible.
Divisible.
I don't have anything. I got a black blob over most of the screen.
Go down, see
It
if you
says
can find
monitor.
your camera and click on the camera part.
My cursor's not even moving.
There you go. Now we see you.
Cursor's not even moving now.
Maybe you need to go out and come back in.
I mean, shut it down.
That's one thing you
I
can
can't
do.
even get the cursor.
Or shut down this window.
I'll have to shut down the whole computer because I can't even get the cursor to move.
Hmm.
Just stay on, Mark, and Scott, go ahead and talk real quick.
I can listen.
Back.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I mean, this is a great example of why that doesn't work. I mean, this is Taylor Street. You can see to the west, the houses are fairly close, and then there's some where they're pretty well back, and they're definitely outside that 10-foot range. Maryland's another good example. Let me zoom in here if I can.
So
Well,
while you're zooming, could we not just say the minimum of the existing street two and the maximum back of streets in the block?
That's what I was.
yeah, I mean, that's my point, is it's a minimum build to, because, you know, here on this is one block of Maryland. You can see these houses are fairly well back. Across the street, they're not. And then as you get down to the other end of that block, they come closer. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, this is just a neighborhood where houses were built at various points in time, and they weren't all built at the same time. So they don't all line up in one row. And that's what we're trying to accommodate here, is the differences of built in time. You know, I mean, that's the way I look at it. Whoops. So, I mean, to just say, here's the minimum setback for this is what I think solves the problem. Because again, they interpreted it as a build to, and that's not it. So just to say minimum takes away that ambiguity.
Well, if we use a minimum setback to the house closest and the maximum setback to the house farthest, we give a range. If that is indeed our intention, to have the houses within that range.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I mean that's an option too. I mean, is there any other neighborhood where we say, you know, you have to build within 5 feet of the setback?
But
We don't have anything but a pure setback line in our regulations right now. So
Right.
You can't build any closer than this to a property line. That's what our.
Yeah, it's a minimum. You know, it's the minimum setback. So.
Right, but Scott, that's why we're doing this, this is a historic neighborhood that we are differentiating. So I had wondered, but looking at how many differences, but whether somehow if you did the average, you could take out the extremes. I mean, to me, our goal is that streetscape, et cetera, but the goal is probably to get it closer to the street in most cases. So trying to figure out how do we word it to be, because that's one of, in historic neighborhoods in older neighborhoods, in grid street neighborhoods, that's one of the characteristics is that it's closer to the street, it's got sidewalks.
Well, I disagree with that. I'm sorry. I mean, go down Holston Ave. I mean, those houses are nowhere near close to the front of the street.
It's a different neighborhood built at a different time. So
yeah. So, but I mean, why is closer to the street better? I don't understand that. I mean, that to me is just a personal preference, and I don't think that's something we as the city should be defining on how people build their houses.
The RE district is not Holston.
I would agree with Margaret's comments, and I think the RE district was established to differentiate it from an R1, R2, or any other district. It is a special district, and I just don't want to totally disregard any standards for streetscape. I don't want to narrowly define them. I want to have a minimum setback and I want to have a maximum setback, whether that comes to through a averaging or establishing, as Kevin was talking about, the closest house and the furthest house in a block on the same side of the street.
Yeah, I believe in some of these houses that was built back in those days, if you will, depending on what size lots people had. You know, somebody had a larger piece of property, you know, they popped it right in the middle, I'm sure, before we had all the regulations. And we're just, you know, we're seeing that, I believe.
And I think one of the things that I saw was a lot of times the placement of the house had to do with whether or not there was an alley back behind the house. That was adjusting the placement of some of the houses.
Yeah.
So the question I have, and we'll just, since you were the last one speaking, Kelly, I feel that we want a range in this zone. The question number one, are you comfortable with doing a range? You know, you have to build within this area, the front facade within this range. And we'll define what that range is a little bit, but is that what you would like to go with, you think?
I think so. What I'm also thinking about is existing houses that may burn down. So now you have a vacant land, and making sure that the replacement house is going to fall into what we're talking about.
And that would be sort of the range, like here's the closest one to and we can define what the range is. But I just wanted to make sure, number one, if we could get everybody that they're comfortable with doing the range, the majority of the commissioners, then we can talk about giving that range. What would that range be? But right now, I'd like to I feel like that's where we're going as a range.
I'm good with the range. I think maybe a 10-foot is too restrictive.
How about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I agree. There should be a range, and to Kelly's point, the range should be established by distance, and not by existing houses, in case the one that's farthest back does disappear, and now it's not the farthest back anymore.
Joel, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree that there should be a range.
Okay. And I think Takai, how do you feel on
it? Daniel, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Can you defend a range in court?
Yeah, because as long as what we draft is clear.
Okay, then I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. The preamble here says the point of this is to make existing homes compliant with the zoning ordinance. So to use the example that was just used, if a house that's further back burns down and they have to rebuild, now they can't rebuild. They have to actually move it, right? Because they would no longer be in compliance.
That'd be true. Unless you have a provision for that.
If it is built to the maximum setback, then that would still be the maximum setback, and it could be built right in the same place.
Well, I was hearing an average with a range plus minus X number of feet. So,
Well,
I mean,
let's work on the range. We'll talk about that here in 1 second and see what people are kind of. Mark Webb, are you comfortable with the range? And you can turn your video back on probably.
Yes, I'm comfortable with that. At minimum and maximum distance.
And Malin, I think I heard you were comfortable with that. I think I covered everybody. Have I missed anybody? Jason, obviously. Margaret, Kelly, yeah. Okay. Now the question is, the range is, do you want, one consideration that I think I've heard a few of y'all talk about, would you want to look at the existing closest one and the existing furthest one and establish that as the range in the block, much like we did the average setback? Or do you want to go?
It's a good starting point. I think that's a good starting point.
We'll have to come up with a map showing, obviously that for each block, similar to the maps we did for the average.
You may have to exercise a little caution there if you have a horrible anomaly that that really sits way back.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If we've had something to sit way back that's very out of character, but it gets calculated in with the average, that skews it. So whether you could drop the formula could drop the most extreme or something. I don't know. I don't know how often that happens. It looks like on Taylor or a few places, it happens a lot. But if there's, but that would be a concern for me, is whether that works to achieve the goal we want.
Well, I think what we would have to do is if we see an anomaly, let the PC recommend what they would like in that block.
Basically, what you're saying is you'll go ahead and we'll come up with an established criteria. You all will then do the maps, and then you will come back to us if there's a sore thumb in there that we need to talk about.
Well, we'll come back to you with
a tweak.
Yes, and we'll come back to you all, and you all would need to adopt the map as the setbacks, map for that area. Because there's otherwise there's no way to write that with the anomalies unless we start getting block by block.
Yeah.
We refer to the average setbacks, which is easy to calculate, and we've calculated those, but the range, I would think, Danielle, what would you do if there's an anomaly? Would you just do it block by block, or would you have them actually adopt the actual setback map for each block?
I think it really depends on what you end up with after you've done a survey of what's on the ground. Because if you're looking at something where you have anomalies in one block, then probably you wouldn't want to adopt a range in that block. So I think that probably needs to be tabled until you get some more data in front of you.
Okay, I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay. Lot on Pennsylvania Avenue where it drops off drastically. How are you going to take that into consideration? Are you limiting to where they can put the building?
I think once again, you look at the block. If the way I hear most people going is you look at the closest and furthest away in that block. And if there's not an anomaly there, if there's not one sitting way back, then you just use that as a definition, you know, the existing, you know, you use it as your guideline for that block. I mean, the closest and the furthest back. In that case, on Pennsylvania, you know, if you say the one on Pennsylvania was existing already, you know, that would be your anomaly in that block right now, that you all would have to actually make a decision on. If we'd have to look at how we crafted that part of the reg. But I mean, I think I hear where everybody's going, and let us work on looking at those blocks and anomalies, see the anomalies we have out there to talk about it. But I think if I hear everybody right, it would be the to go with a range based on the closest and the furthest away. And then if there are anomalies, then let's talk about them. Is that what I'm hearing? I believe from everybody. I think everybody's nodding their head yes that I see there.
Well, I'm still confused about this anomaly. What are we going to have in the zoning ordinance? Individual houses that are excluded?
Let us see what anomalies, if any, there are, and then we can talk about just through it, because I don't know without going and looking. You know, we don't have that data in front of us right now. And there might be a one-off, or there may be zero. I don't know. I mean, that's what we'll just have to go look at them and see.
And Tim, on to further Scott's, I guess, question, would there be a period in which we could have a public comment, I guess, to address these anomalies, to explain to people? And I don't know whether or not the best thing would be for the entire community, or that particular community, or the people who actually own the anomaly, because I think, you know, we should make them aware that they're an anomaly on their block, just in case, for them, for their reference only.
Right. We certainly, if we find anything, can talk with anybody that we feel is an anomaly of their property and get their feelings. That's no problem to do that. I don't think there'll be a lot of those, just from the brief looking at, not brief, but just as I did what Scott did and just use Google Earth to look over, you know, spend about 20 minutes looking around to see, just to see what the patterns look like in those areas. So we'll just have to look at it, and then we can bring back and talk further about those somewhat, if there are any. But let us do some homework on those, if there are any anomalies first. But I think I've got the gist of where everybody wants to go, and then we'll look for anomalies on that slide.
You know, another factor that might come into play is, just like that Pennsylvania lot, is topo. And topo will adversely affect setback lines, depending on, I don't know if there's other lots that are going to have that kind of topo.
Yes, there's one block down, Kelly.
Okay. That may have to get figured into it. But do the field work and see if topo is going to create issues also.
Well, if topography would prevent somebody from, just as in any zoning reg and setback, topography is one consideration for the BZA to grant a variance. If it is topographically an issue there, to prevent them from building a structure based on that topography. So that is one way topography is held. You know, your zoning reg takes topography into consideration. But we'll look at topo. We'll look at topo also.
That's what I was referring to with the drop off on the lot.
Yes. So we'll look at those, but you know, that is one way to ask for a variance from planning commission, is topography is one of the specific ways. So, all right, Sheriff, what time is it?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. You want to move on to the regular meeting, Mr. Chairman, now, and then we can circle back around with this discussion at the end.
Well, let me ask you this. Would it be appropriate to open up the regular meeting and adjust the agenda to finish this up?
You have some participants that I don't know if you want to make them wait through the whole discussion or not
Okay.
right now. At least get through the actionable items and then we'll get into the discussion. And if we want to bring this back up first in the discussion points, we can.
Can we take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I need to see if I can reboot this computer.
5 minutes. We would like to call the September 21st meeting of the Bristol, Tennessee Planning Commission into session. We will start off with a roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Here.
Malin Luttrell,
Here.
Joel Staten is here. Jason Boer,
Here.
Kevin Buck,
Here.
Scott,
Here.
Takai,
Here.
Mark,
Here.
Margaret.
Here.
Everybody's here, sir.
Thank you very much. We'd like to apologize to everybody for being a little bit late getting started. We had a work session in the last hour, and during that work session, we had a discussion about the fact that we were doing this electronically. And at that point in time, our council read us a statement about the necessity of doing that. We took a vote on whether or not the members of the Planning Commission approved us doing an electronic meeting, and it did pass unanimously. So we do not feel the need to do it again as we're continuing on. So that being said and done, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. We have the August 17th, 2020 minutes in front of you. Is there any discussion about or correction of those minutes? Hearing, seeing none, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve,
Second.
and we have a second. Thank you, City Council. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have several items on the agenda tonight. First, and on every item that comes up on the agenda, we will invite the public to speak to each individual item. However, before we get into the scheduled agenda items, we have an item on here called Unscheduled Comments from the Public. So if anybody from the public would like to address the Planning Commission on an item that is not on the agenda, now is the time to do it. Mr. Beavers, do we have anybody that wants to address us on something that is not on the agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman, we do not have anybody in attendance to speak about items that are not on the agenda.
Thank you, sir. The next item is old business. It shows that we have no old business in front of us tonight, which takes us to the next item, which is new business. The first item up is a special use permit, and it is my understanding that we'll have people from the public that will be addressing this, and staff will be bringing them in to address us. So we'll get report from staff. Please go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, up for consideration tonight is a special use permit to allow multifamily residences in a B3 general business district zone. The applicant was a Gary Smith, and he is in attendance tonight. And the real estate agent is Linda Rhodes, and she is in attendance tonight. And we do also have one person from the public in attendance, John Van Arsdale, and they may wish to speak at some point during this discussion item. This is for the estate of Lawrence Garland, and its location is 2279, 2283, 2295 Feathers Chapel Road. So there's 3 addresses, 3 lots there. Tax map 66, parcel 9210, 5.25 acres. With that, I will let Sheriff Young give the presentation to you all. Sheriff, you're muted.
Got it. Sorry about that. Thank you. That's that couple seconds to get it unmuted. It's just, okay. And would you mind to pull up the slideshow, Tim? Sorry. But this request tonight is for a special use permit application on Feathers Chapel Road. It's 2279, 2283, and 2295 Feathers Chapel Road. This site is approximately 5.25 acres. And as Tim said, the use requested is for multifamily use in a B3. So the multifamily use does require a special use permit in the B3 zone. And this property is obviously zoned B3. So let's see here. I've got an image for you. While Tim's pulling that up, I'll try to describe here. The site actually has
It should
frontage.
be, can you all see the image?
Oh,
Oh,
What
Now we got your introductory slide.
Yeah, the very first slide is up for the
That's weird.
September 21st meeting.
Oh, hold on. I don't know how to, here we go. How's that?
There we go.
much better.
I should
Okay,
have
so-
it was on pause for some reason, the slide share, so sorry there.
Okay, so here is the site identified in red. Has frontage on Highway 394. It has frontage on Feathers Chapel Road. The parcel adjacent back towards the intersection of 394 and Feathers Chapel is in PBD, but the property located across the street and on the other side is zoned B3 to the site. The surrounding zoning and land use, again, I just talked about, you have B3 and PBD in the surrounding area. Existing land uses to the north, you have Highway 394 right away, vacant land. To the south, you have some commercial property. You have many warehouses and the golf course parking lot. And then to the east and west, you do have residential uses. So this is a concept plan for the project. You'll see there are 2 access points from Feathers Chapel into this property. There are 32 residential units here. So 4 clusters of buildings, but 32 total units. So everything will be accessed and really front along the Feathers Chapel Road side of this piece of property. The next slide shows a few images of the site. So this is on Feathers Chapel Road looking east. The next slide is looking west in the other direction. The next slide is looking north on Feathers Chapel Road. And then the next side is from Highway 394 looking south. So tonight, the Planning Commission will discuss the criteria that the zoning ordinance sets forth for the Planning Commission to look at when they review a special use permit. Those items are ingress and egress, off-street parking and loading, refuse, availability of utilities, screening and buffering, signage and exterior lighting, setbacks, maximum lot coverage and density, and then general compatibility. So we'll begin with ingress and egress. As pointed out, and you also on that concept plan, they are proposing 2 access points for this project on Feathers Chapel Road. At any time, they would propose or consider any kind of development along Highway 394. Those Highway 394 overlay requirements do kick in. So there should not be any safety or capacity issues on Feathers Chapel Road for the planned access points onto Feathers Chapel Road. What you all are looking at right now tonight is the concept plan. So it's kind of the initial big picture design of the project. The applicant will have to submit additional drawings as they go through the site plan application process. So we will get more defined and precise plans as we go forward with this project, if the project's approved by the Planning Commission tonight.
And Sheriff, just to jump in there, what you see is just a drawing showing the proposed units that will have to come back before y'all with a full concept plan to vote on. As far as the layout, just the first part is granting the special use permit. Should you all grant that special use permit, then the developer will have to submit us a good concept plan that shows the more detail than what's on their initial rendering there. So really just for tonight is just special use permit B3 and allowing multifamily units.
Right. And then also they'll have to file a site plan application as well once the concept plan is approved. And we'll work with them all through those processes. As far as parking goes, the zoning ordinance requires 1.5 spaces per unit, which would equal 48 spaces required. In this drawing, the concept for the special use permit application shows 92 parking spaces. So they exceed what's required by the zoning ordinance. At this point, refuse and service areas have not been shown, but commercial refuse collection will be required for the project, and it will need to be screened. It must be screened per the zoning ordinance. So any and all refuse areas will be shown on the concept plan that will be reviewed later by the Planning Commission. Utilities, water service is provided by the city. Sanitary sewer service is provided by the city. And then electricity is available through Bristol, Tennessee Essential Services. For screening and buffering, staff does recommend that a buffer area type A be used along the property lines immediately adjacent to the residential homes. So that's the east and the west property lines. The remainder of the development would just be required to install landscaping per the zoning ordinance. So we will recommend in the staff recommendation that the buffer area type A be used, and buffer type area A is described on the lower side of the screen. So it's just some additional screening and buffering for those residential uses on either side of the property. But they do have 3 options to meet that buffer type A requirement.
And the buffer area, that is what would be required by the zoning regulations. If it wasn't going to special use permit, it would still require that type A buffer. The reason we're recommending the type A buffer is because that's what the zoning regulations would require. But with a special use, if y'all feel there needs to be a more stringent buffer requirement, certainly you could approve a more stringent buffer requirement.
Signage and exterior lighting, with the concept for the special use, they have not shown signage or lighting, but we will work throughout this process to ensure that all the requirements of the zoning ordinance and city code are met and appropriately permitted for signage and lighting. Setbacks, lot coverage, and density. The proposed structures as shown on this plan do meet the setback requirements. This area does not lie within a flood hazard area. And then from a density standpoint, the number of units proposed is less than the maximum number of units allowed per the B3 zone. And this project does, as shown tonight, meet the lot coverage requirement. General compatibility. This is located on a commercial corridor where businesses are likely to occur. There is a variety of uses out there on Feathers Chapel Road. So there's golf course, many warehouses, office buildings, single family homes, and a townhome development within this vicinity of this proposed project. So for these reasons, staff does feel that the project is compatible with the current uses on Feathers Chapel Road. Public notification for this project, we did advertise the special use meeting in the September 3rd edition of the Bristol Herald Courier. There were public notification signs posted on the property, which those appeared in some of those photos we showed earlier. And then we did notify adjacent property owners of this request by letter. And when we send out the notification letters, we include a form which allows folks to send back their comments to us. So we did receive one comment letter expressing objection. This party also followed up with an email requesting more specific details of the development. And we did receive actually 3 phone calls, one today. So I'm going to add one to the 2 listed on the screen. We received 3 telephone calls in total with people inquiring about the project, but didn't really express any kind of objection or any kind of positive reaction either way. Just curious, looking for information on what was going on. So the staff recommendation to the Planning Commission tonight is for the approval of the special use permit for a multifamily use with the following condition. And that condition is that the type A landscape buffer as defined in the zoning ordinance be required along the entire length of the east and west property lines that are adjacent to residential lots. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as Mr. Beaver stated, the applicant and his realtor are present tonight, and I'm sure they can provide more information as well.
Thank you very much. Before we get into it, let's handle some of the logistics of exactly what we're doing and what would happen in the future. Correct me if I'm wrong on this. By asking for the special use permit, the okay for the special use permit, all they're asking is, are we okay by doing multifamily on this piece of property? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Once they know that, then they're going to start spending real money. Because as I'm looking at the site plan and so forth, the things that are going to be addressed later on and so forth. So what is going to come back in front of us again, and what will our input be then after we approve a special use permit, if we approve a special use permit?
You will look at the concept plan for the development because of the Highway 394 corridor overlay, and to make sure that you're comfortable that the concept plan meets the requirements and the intent of that overlay district.
Under the assumption that we approve the idea of multifamily housing, what objections would we still be able to raise later on if we don't like the plan once it's submitted to us, once they've done the engineering and it's submitted to us?
There'll be several items you look at. You'll look more specifically at location of refuse areas, screening that they're going to provide for those, the building elevations, the facades, as far as to make sure they are compatible with our, in general, with the new design standards. This will be a multifamily, so they are subject to those new design standards that were approved several months ago and are in effect. And you'll also, at that point, you'll get detailed in and out where the actual entrances will be, more detailed drawings on those, refined drawings to show those ingress egress points on Feathers Chapel Road, and the actual, let's say the preliminary design of them as far as more detail than what's shown right now. Basically what you're looking at right now is Planning Commission, before I start spending some money, going to approve a special use for the building. So in general, as Sheriff ran down, you'll look at, yes, we feel or don't feel that multifamily is compatible with the neighborhood. And if we do feel it's compatible, here are additional requirements that we would like to put on that from a use standpoint, be it screening and buffering. At this point, if you said, no, I don't like any entrances on Feathers Chapel Road, obviously we'd need to know that because they'd be coming off Highway 394. So there are some specific things right now that you're looking at as far as the use and compatibility of the proposal for that neighborhood. It's similar, and I know it was more refined when you did the special use concept. I don't believe Jason was on the board at the time, but right down on Highway 394, you approved the concept plan for the dental office, the shopping center, and in the back, it had multifamily development in the back part of that you all approved a special use permit on previously. And that's just within a couple of 1,000 feet of this site on 394 on the same side of the road. So in general, once again, you're looking at, is it compatible with the neighborhood from a use standpoint? And if they feel it is good, the use is compatible, then how do we want to define more things on the special use to make it fit the neighborhood better? So.
All right, let's turn it over to the what we're going to do this. The Planning Commission is going to talk to staff, ask questions, et cetera, et cetera. Then at that point in time, we will ask the people from the audience that want to address us if they do. So let's turn it over to Planning Commission. Have at it.
So do you just want questions, Chairman, or some comments as well?
Both. Any questions that you've got for staff or any comments you want to make? This is our discussion time.
So I guess a concern I have, or whether it could be done a little differently, is I like that there's two entrance, ingress, egress areas, but I don't like that they aren't connected. So I don't know if that's possible to connect them so that people have that option. So anyway, so it makes it more like connected units or whatever. So, and I know that adds additional costs, so it may be cost prohibitive to make the project work, but I think I would like to see the connection.
All right.
And that could be if you feel, if Planning Commission feels that's a requirement of the special use to, for safety, they certainly could put that on the special use permit. That if there are multiple entrances, that they require some interconnectivity on the lot between the entrances.
Has this been in front of Dave yet?
Yes, sir.
He's good with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I mean, we'll have to, once again, once we get the more refined design, we'll make sure, but in general, yes, we're comfortable with Feathers Chapel Road having the capacity, and the ingress egress there would be safe, and they'll refine that design ultimately for us. But we do feel that that would not make the road unsafe, either capacity or location wise. So.
I don't know that Dave looks at the internal part of it. It's he looks at what the internal traffic pattern is of the two units.
Right.
Okay.
Question. I notice here that it looks like about 25% of this lot is not being used. If we grant a special request permit, can anything else go in that unused lot other than multifamily?
Whatever is allowed by the zoning regulations, B3 being our general business district, could go on that lot with, in conjunction, the multifamily. That would be not come back for you except for the Highway 394 concept plan would have to come back for you for any other use, but not as a use by special use. It's a use by right. The general business district uses, that's our most lenient general business district. I said it's much similar to the one that's just right down the road that y'all approved that had a, if they wanted to, that one had a shopping complex, doctor's office in the front, and then multifamily in the back. And this could be developed similar to that one.
Or they could go in there and put more multifamily units in there without any just site plan approval, right?
The concept plan would have to show that, and if they wanted to add more, they'd have to come back with an additional concept.
Okay.
Basically, right now, you're saying, yes, we're comfortable that this can be developed in a multifamily setting, and then the concept plan will come back and further define that as they get into engineering, surveying, all those expenses associated with that. So
I was just curious what they'd use that rest of that 25% lot for.
And the owner's developer and the realtor can speak to that when they're, y'all can ask them specifically But in general, once again, you're just approving, yes, we feel multifamily will work or won't work in this setting.
Yeah, but Tim, I mean, I had that question too. I mean, if it's 15 an acre and it's 5 1/4, that's 79 units, right?
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, if we approve it, I mean, right now they have 36, but they could come back and say, oh yeah, no, we want to do 78, and we can't say no at that point, right?
Well, I don't, and Danielle can weigh in here. I don't believe that Danielle, can they limit the number of units during the special use permit process, or is it just compatibility, or help me out there?
Well, if our zoning ordinance already sets out a maximum for density in this zone for multifamily, then I think it would be a little awkward to then it further. I think though that if you're concerned about the idea that somebody may come back and try to put additional units on the part that's not covered by the special use permit, potentially you could make that a condition of the special use permit, is that you're only granting the special use permit portion that's shown on the concept.
We as staff don't have problems with the number of units up to the density, obviously. We feel the road, which the biggest impact would be road, and screening. Like I said, the zoning regulations requires that type A screening. Y'all could put a heavier screening on there if you choose to, on the special use, or even at the concept plan. But like I said, the type A is what the zoning requirements, be it 3 units or 103 units, would require based on our existing zoning regulations when you're adjacent to residential property, multifamily.
Yeah, I guess I'm just a little. I'm with Mark that it seems weird that almost half of this thing is not being used, and it just strikes me as odd, and I feel like we approve. I mean, I probably don't have a problem with high density here because it is a business 3, but it just feels like we're going to approve it and then it's going to come back completely different than what we see here, and that doesn't quite sit with me.
So do we know what size units these are going to be? Is it going to be a mixture of 1, 2, 3 bedroom units? Do we know?
We can ask the developers that in a minute. Y'all can.
Hey, Tim,
I have a question. The storage units that are located across the street, if memory serves me, they were in existence prior to the city annexing Feathers Chapel Road. That may be incorrect. If it's not correct, correct me. But do they conform to B3? Do those storage units meet that zoning requirement for B3?
Sheriff, you can help me, but I think the mini warehouses are a special use permit in the B3. I do believe some of them were in existence, Jason, but I have slept, but not all of them. And there might have been a site plan once it was in the city to add some more. I just, once again, have slept and would have to research that further. But there certainly were some mini warehouses present when we annexed it back in the 90s and early 2000s. But for something in the back of my mind, I think there was an addition made to those units at some point, which would have at that time, I do believe, would have required a special use permit back in that time frame. So hope that answers it somewhat.
Sheriff Tim, just for my information, what type of landscape buffering is used across the street with that storage unit?
Once again, that would have been prior to us annexing, so I'm not sure what type of buffer, if any, the county required.
Okay.
And I'd have to just go back and look at our site plans, pull our site plans to see what was there. But if you go by our zoning regulations, it would have a more intense buffer than many warehouses would than multifamily up against a residential. So there's a chart in the zoning regs
Okay.
that spells out, like, if the use is your residential use, a higher density residential, like your R3, R4, R5, up against a single family duplex residential unit, it says type A buffer. And then it goes, if it's the business districts, it's got for different levels of intensity next to a residential, there are different types of buffers. A, B, and C are the three types of buffers that are currently in the zoning regs. But there is a chart that we use, and under that it explains what a medium to low impact buffer is, a high to medium, a high to low. So that's how we got the type A buffer recommendation for this, was just, that's what our zoning regulations would require. But with the special use, you can require more intense buffering if you choose to.
I was just curious about whether or not it would be consistency was important throughout that little area. But, you know.
It would be a more dense buffering if, like I said, those many warehouses were done today. It would have a more intense buffering requirement than the residential to multifamily.
I'm not certain if it's a density requirement, but there are pine trees between the golf course and the storage facility and the adjacent property to the west. And it's not very dense because a golf ball will travel through it.
So to follow up on the example and also what Jason asked, just for clarification. So if we approve the special use permit, they're going to come back, they build their units or whatever. If they want to put storage units on that, if then it's been approved for a special use permit, unless we restrict it to multifamily, then they could go ahead and do that without coming back to planning commission. Tim, you're shaking your head.
No, this is a specific request to allow multifamily on that B3. If they wanted to do their other special use permit
for anything else, it would have to come back.
Like there's in the zoning reg for B3, there's like, here are uses by right.
Okay,
Like
so uses by right they can do, but anything that's in the special use, they'd have to come back and ask.
Yes, and it's not carte blanche, everything in there. It's specific to the one item that they
Right.
request.
Great, perfect, thanks.
I have a question about the planned business unit, planned business district to the east. What's that plan to be?
It's zone PBD. There are no plans over there. There's an existing single family residential home. The difference between your B3 and your planned business district is the setbacks are different on those zones. And there's a level of scrutiny in the PBD that the planning commission gets to have. Now, this is in the Highway 394 corridor, so you have that scrutiny anyway with this overlay. But in general, unless you're in an overlay, any PBD zone, you all would look at those plans.
Yeah, so a little bit more of a question is, why are those two there? They seem like they're spot zoned, right?
We would have to go back and pull at the time of annexation why those were chosen to be PBD. That's
okay.
A couple of decades ago now, close to it, so don't know
off
the top of our head.
All right. Anything else for staff? If you guys are ready, we will bring the public in to discuss this. Tim, how are you handling that?
Yes, Steve can hear me, and we will get the developer and the real estate agent in first. You will have Mr. Gary Smith and I forgot the
Linda Rhodes.
Yes, and he'll bring them back right now to the public comment computer where you can ask them questions. Miss Rhodes and Mr. Smith. And they're walking down the hallway. They're almost there. So
Very good.
and he'll have to turn on the mic and video for them.
Have they been watching what we were doing?
Yes, sir. All three participants that are here at the annex are live, so they've seen, even during the break, they saw, because they're watching it via Zoom and not streaming off the TV, so there is zero delay for them. And Steve, it's there you go. He's got it. Yep. Okay, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith is there if you wish to ask him questions.
What we're going to do right now is we're going to open it up to you guys to answer questions from the Planning Commission. But it is my understanding you guys have been watching the proceedings up to now. So you know the discussion that we've had. You also know some of the questions that are probably going to be asked of you. What I'm going to ask you and Linda both to do when you speak is to give us your name and your address for the record in the minutes. You're up. Your name and address, please.
My name is Gary Smith. My address is 167 Tailwater Road, Bluff City, Tennessee.
Very good. Does anybody want to ask any questions at this point in time?
Yes, Chairman. I have two questions I'd like to ask, please.
Please, go ahead.
If I may, Mr. Smith, Ms. Rhodes, the type of units that you're proposing here, will they be single level or multi-level units? And the other question would be will these be rentals or units sold?
They are single level and they're rentals.
Have you come up with a bedroom mix yet?
They're all one bedroom.
There has been some discussion about whether or not you would want to add additional units. I'm sure you heard that discussion. Address that, please, if you don't mind.
We have no, we're not interested in putting any more units on the property. So if y'all wanted to restrict this special use permit for exactly what we're proposing, I'm fine with that. The topo and the limestone rock prevents it from being economically feasible for any more units to be on the property.
Anybody else with questions? Jason?
Mr. Gaynor, have you developed any other properties like this anywhere near us here in Bristol or in Bristol?
Excuse me?
Have you developed any other properties or rental units like what you're proposing for this property in Bristol?
No, sir. I have some rental property, but not like this. I have a small apartment building in Piney Flats and some houses, but not like this.
Anything else from the Planning Commission for the developer?
Yeah, would these units be high end, low end, medium range?
They're medium range.
Yeah, we can say we do need housing and probably need housing in every range, but definitely for our workers, essential workers, people who, young people starting out, I'd say we need that kind of housing. So good choice to add to our housing stock.
All right, what other questions do we have tonight? Linda, I don't know if you're there, but you're getting off easy.
I'm Linda Rhodes. I live at 312 Timberlane Road in Bristol, and I'm grateful that I'm getting off easy.
All right, is there anything else? Or are we going to bring it back to the Planning Commission to look for a motion?
I think there's another speaker.
Yes, I'm going to go check real quick, Mr. Chairman, to see if they.
Thank you, I forgot about that. Thank you.
I'm checking real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
We need to put some decoration on that wall. It looks rather institutional.
Want to borrow my background?
Oh, it doesn't work on my computer. You get a cheap old computer and it doesn't work. And no, I wouldn't. Can I get one for LSU?
They don't exist anymore.
All right, no.
I looked at my screen and saw Scott Gaynor below his picture, so I acknowledge I referred to him as Mr. Gaynor.
How about that?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, you have Mr. Van Arsdale here to speak to you.
Sir, if you do not mind, give us your name and your address, and floor is yours to speak.
Yes, sir. I'm John Van Arsdale, and I live at 2357 Feathers Chapel Road. That referred to as the property east of the proposed development.
Thank you, sir. What discussion do you have about this proposed special use permit?
One is that I could not see what a type A landscape buffer would be, but I'm concerned about that buffer being effective enough to keep my property quiet. And so I was just going to ask first off again, can you elaborate a little bit more on what a type A landscape buffer would be?
All right, if you'll hold on 1 second. There we go. Tim, if you want to address that, or Sheriff, who's going to address it?
Sheriff, you can read the 3 options for those. And I think, Mr. Van Arsdale, can you see those options on the screen?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, read them real quick, Sheriff.
Okay. Option. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you want me to read them?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
So option 1 is a minimum buffer strip of 8 feet in width with 1 row of evergreen trees or other acceptable buffer species spaced no greater than 8 feet on center. Number 2 is a minimum buffer strip of 8 feet in width with 1 row of evergreen trees or acceptable buffer species spaced no greater than 12 feet on center and a minimum of 2 evergreen shrubs per tree. And option number 3 is a solid barrier masonry wall or wooden fence or equivalent at least 6 feet in height. The buffer strip shall be no less than 5 feet in width.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
That answers the question. In developing that property along the line, I've got a buffer I put up 20 years ago of Leland cypress trees down that, expecting this property to be developed eventually. My second question, though, and of course, with high density development with the lots of families moving in, one of the things is I've lived there 28 years, and in doing that, I would hope to sell my property eventually and be able to recoup my investment. And I'm concerned, would that property as zoned and as used, how would it affect the value of my property? Would it affect it in an upward or a downward, or would it be at a neutral? I don't know. I don't understand that.
You have no clue how many times we get asked that question. And unfortunately, that's not something we can address. We do not know.
Well, my property is zoned PBD and it's used as residential. And in selling my property, the only way that I can sell it is that it would have to be purchased by somebody. If they were to buy my property, they would have to get a loan likely, and that loan would have to be a business loan. They cannot buy it residential when it's zoned PBD. And so eventually that property, when I try to sell that, would be offered as a business purchase. And so my thoughts in this is how is this going to impact my opportunity to sell my property? And that's one of the reasons I was here, is to try to learn what they're doing next door. And so I'm sure you don't have a way of being able to predict that either. But if it came to a point in the future that it was affecting my ability to sell my property, would I be able to approach the Planning Commission and possibly rezone, or how is that to operate? How do I do with that?
Tim, I'm going to let you address that, please.
Well, certainly we can't tell you how it's going to affect your property one way or the other in the future sale. If you did want to in the future look at a rezoning, certainly we could speak to you about the specific rezoning you requested and what the staff recommendation would be to the Planning Commission for that specific type of rezoning. Right now, like I said, the PBD, I hope you got to hear me, but the PBD and the B3, they allow similar uses currently, and the PBD just has more restrictive setbacks for commercial. Single family and duplex homes are allowed by right in B3 and PBD. So they are allowed in those zones and could be developed that way. The only residential that requires a special use permit is the multifamily use. But that is just how our zoning regulations are set up currently. So, but in the future, if you see something might change how you want your property rezoned, we could entertain looking at that with you anytime. We do have to be careful about spot zoning to make sure, as Mr. Gaynor mentioned earlier, that we don't spot zone properties, but we could look at anything if you thought you might want it zoned a particular way, staff could sit down with you and look and see if we felt as a staff that would be something we could support as a staff. But ultimately the Planning Commission makes a recommendation to City Council for any rezoning. So that would totally be up to those two boards. So I hope that answers your question somewhat there.
Hey, Tim.
Yes.
I got a question. How did that even become a planned business district? I mean, I thought an entity has to actually own it to apply for that, right?
No,
I mean,
when we annexed that property back in the 90s or late 90s, early 2000s, whatever the effective date of annexation, zoning was assigned to that by the Planning Commission, made a recommendation, and City Council approved zonings for those properties. It was not just annexing one property, there were several in that annexation properties. So we would have to go back and pull those records to see if we could understand why they zoned some PBD, why they zoned some B3. So I don't.
Well, I mean, he said he's had it for 27 years. So, I mean, that.
He was probably, you were annexed, weren't you, Mr. Van Arndt?
Yes, sir, I was.
Yeah, and we assumed that PBD at that time of annexation to it. So, and that was,
So 394 was not there at that time.
Right.
No, it was there.
Yeah.
I was zoned R1 when I bought the property, and when I was annexed, I was assigned to B3. Although I've used it as residential from the very beginning of the annexation to present.
yes, most of those properties down that 394 corridor were zoned PBD or B3 back in the annexation when that took place.
Right. Mr. Garland requested B3 when he had the property zoned, and that's how it was zoned by his request. And then my property, isolated from everything else, was zoned PBD. And so it's been zoned that way since.
Yes, and like I said, we'd have to go back and look at the records to try to figure out why it was zoned PBD at the time. I just do not have that information if I remembered it, I have slept since then. So
I might sort of remember, which I don't know that it really matters, but I think the planned business district was relatively new and it was created for us the first time to use it in mid to late 90s. And I think we felt like there's more opportunity for input for doing attractive commercial developments with PBD. So I have no idea why some were B3 and some were PBD, though. I have no idea.
PBD certainly allows more flexibility in development, especially if you've got a parent tract and you're going to subdivide it into smaller tracts. The most restrictive setback would be on the parent tract and not the smaller tracts. I think internally that there's 0 setbacks on the PBD, but externally to the tract, there's a 25-foot setback on all property lines. So.
My property was built 1851 as a historic site or a historic home. No, it's not designated a historic site, but it certainly is a historic home. And so it's built much differently than the surrounding properties. And so that might have been a reason too to consider it PBD at the time, because there was discussion of protecting the property, that it not be altered significantly in the manner that it is now, being an 1851 farmhouse. So that was my only assumption at the time that I was annexed, why it was PBD. I didn't know, I didn't understand. But my main concern was, again, how is this development next door going to impact the resellability and the value of my property, because I've invested a lot of my own personal income into it and developing as it is. And I did not want it to be impacted into a negative. And so that was my reason for being here. I have no reason otherwise. I look forward to development around that of course, that it be done properly, and that it may increase, or at least increase the opportunity of my sale when I do come to the time to do that.
Certainly, residential development, even multifamily, is more compatible with your property as it exists right now with the single family. Obviously, B3 by right, being zone B3, the property that we're discussing tonight, there could be, that's our most lenient business district. So there are a lot of uses that could go on there that would not be compatible with your property. So
right. As
of right now, currently, I can tell you that the residential is more compatible with your property as is. Currently, if you chose, or somebody chose in the future to develop your property commercially, you'd have to look and see exactly what they were going to put on there. And it might be help it by having residents. If say it's a convenience store or something that would shop there, it may not. I mean, that's obviously you'd have to use a crystal ball or somebody on that. But right. Currently I can say the residential is more compatible with your existing use currently.
All right, well, that's my main concern, is that I can get back out of my property when I do sell it, at least a decent return on my investment and not lose. So I have no opposition. I'm here, like I said, just to learn. So
Mr. Van Arsdale, did the question you had about the buffer and the description and answer of the 3 options for buffer type A, did that alleviate your concern as it relates to a buffer once you became aware of that information?
It does, pretty much, because it shows that it's going to be well buffered with an 8-foot wide strip going down the full length of that property. It's very nice and quiet where I live, and have been for nearly 30 years, 28 years. I don't look forward to a lot of activity and motion. If you know about Feathers Chapel Road, it is basically a shortcut across 390 from 394. People take that shortcut often, and it is actually a quite congested road. I mean, it stays busy, people moving up and down it. Just a lot more traffic going to be there right next door to me, obviously. And so those thoughts are why I'm here, is how is it going to impact my property? And you've answered the questions, and I see that the buffer would be what I consider probably quite adequate. So I think that I just go home and think now.
General statement that I'd make about the buffering, it has evolved. and it has evolved in a way that it has gotten thicker and wider and bigger through the years. So the buffer that we have in place now is there for the neighbors' protection pretty good.
That's great, and I appreciate that it be type A. That's the more buffer I get, the better. I've not had neighbors other than a golf course for many, many years. This would be new to me. That's why I'm here. I appreciate.
We really appreciate you coming in. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the answers. Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't believe there's anybody else. Margaret, thank you for pointing out the fact that we did have somebody. Do we have anybody else that's supposed to be addressing us?
No, Mr. Chairman, that's all in attendance tonight.
All right, then let's bring it back to the Planning Commission, and let's look for a motion one way or the other, please.
This is Kevin, Mr. Chairman. Move that we approve the special use as presented by the staff.
Thank you, Mr. Buck. Is there a second?
This is Mark. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. We will now open the floor for discussion for the motion that is on the floor. Not hearing any additional discussion. Roll call.
Kelly Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staten is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next item is going to be final plat of the reserve. And I do understand that Lisa White is the legal representative of Leonard Farms. Would it be best to go ahead and bring her in now, put her in front of the camera?
However you wish to do it. Mr.
Why don't we go ahead and do
She's
that?
on the line, so she just has to unmute and turn on her video.
Okay, she's doing it by Zoom.
Yeah, she's via Zoom.
Very good. Very good.
Anyway,
All right.
Either way you want to do it, I can go ahead if you would like. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Up for consideration on Planning Commission is final plat approval of a 3-lot subdivision at the reserve at Leonard Farms. Lots 17 and 18 and 19 will be new lots. Basically, they're taking 1 lot and making 3 out of it currently. It's approximately current acreage of the parent tract is 5.673. Zoning's R1A. With that, I'll let Ms. Young give the presentation.
Thank you. So yes, this plat for your review and consideration for approval tonight is for the reserve at Leonard Farms. It's an approximately 5.673 acre piece of property. It's zoned R1A, which is our low density single family district. And just as background information, the preliminary plat approval for this area was approved in March of 2003. So the request for you all tonight is for the final plat approval for this particular section of the Leonard Farms subdivision. So here is a map that shows, it shows the zoning of the area, but it also indicates in red the area under consideration for subdivision tonight. And the reason that the Planning Commission is looking at this tonight is that any subdivision of 3 lots or more is considered a major subdivision, which must be approved by the Planning Commission. So because this is a 3-lot subdivision, it is before you for approval. Here is the plat. This shows the configuration of the 3 new lots along Creekside Court, and then the 1 lot, of course, has some frontage on Mountain Vista as well. And just one more note, the roads, streets in this subdivision are private, but built to public standards. Just a few quick notes about the plat. Water service and sanitary sewer service are available from the city of Bristol. Everything here shown does meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance in terms of lot size and density. Staff has reviewed the plat and it does meet all of the requirements of the subdivision regulations. And then as far as ingress and egress goes, we talked about on the image, sorry, Tim, that they have access onto Creekside Court for 2 of the lots, 17 and 18, and then access off Mountain Vista Drive for lot 19 as well. So the recommendation then tonight to Planning Commission from the staff is for the approval of the final plat for the reserve at Leonard Farm subdivision plat, noting conformance to the subdivision regulations as well as the zoning ordinance. That I'm happy to answer any questions. And as you stated, Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Lisa White is here representing this project.
Thank you very much. Any questions of staff? Does anybody have any questions for Ms. White? Question I've got, not that it matters that much, the remainder of track 3, can it be further subdivided in the future?
Yes, sir. That could be, as long as the proposed lots, even the remainder of, we'll call it lot 17. I can't read that small print, but you've got lot 17, 18, and 19. Those 17 and 19 could be further subdivided as long as they met the subdivision regulations for R1A.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody have any questions for staff or council? Hearing and seeing none, is there a motion?
Motion to approve the plat as stated.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Who's the second?
Scott.
Thank you, Scott. There is a motion and a second on the floor to accept the staff's recommendation. Is there any discussion on that motion? Roll call.
Ellie Graham,
Yes.
Malin Luttrell,
Yes.
Joel Staton is yes. Jason Boer,
Yes.
Kevin Buck,
Yes.
Scott Gaynor,
Yes.
Takai Shu,
Yes.
Mark Webb,
Yes.
Margaret Firerobin.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, very much on that one. Lisa, we appreciate you coming in. Yes.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much.
Glad to do it.
All right. You have a good night.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Other matters, city council update.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just real quick on the city council at their September 1st meeting, approved on first reading the rezoning of the old Sunset Motel on the Volunteer Parkway from R3 to B3. The public hearing and second reading for that rezoning request will be held on October 6th at 7 p.m. That meeting will be electronically, so it will be a Zoom meeting, and options for having comment on that public hearing will be placed on the city's website. And that was all the actions at City Council this past September 1st meeting.
Thank you, kind sir. Discussion of food trucks.
And this is where, Mr. Chairman, you can take it in any order you want. If you want to circle back to RE, we can. I would like to, if you want to do the special use permit expiration, that is something that next time we could bring back as an actionable item. If you want to talk about it real quick first. And since we were doing special use permits, if you want to move that one up first or whatever order you want to take.
Let's just go ahead and take it in the order. After we do the printed menu, we'll go back to the where we were before.
All right, up to discuss next is temporary mobile vending units. Sheriff will speak to this, but in general, as people have seen, and I think COVID may have brought this further to fruition. Can't say that word tonight, but mobile vending has certainly popped up more in residential areas, and we do allow them currently in commercial areas. It is something I think all planning commissions and governments are looking at, is to refine those regulations to allow some diversity, more diversity in mobile vending units than is currently allowed in most regulations. But with that, I'll let Sheriff step you all through some information. And what we're trying to do is just gauge, do you all want to open this up for us to bring back to you with some recommendations or changes to the mobile vending regulations? Sheriff?
Thank you. So I'll just provide y'all just a little background on this, what we're seeing locally, regionally, and then we can kind of get your feel on if there's a need to do anything. There's a case that it really kind of came up in Sullivan County, so Dr. Webb may be able to kind of give us some behind the scenes as well. But there was a rezoning in the county recently where a person who owns a food truck requested a rezoning to be able to have her food truck in operation at least seasonally to year round, because she was impacted obviously by COVID-19 and the inability to take her food truck out to what she used to do, which were, festivals, events, music venues, all those good things that are so popular with food trucks. So she, I think, sounded like was doing well in having the food truck set up in her yard, but obviously presented some, probably could have presented some concerns for the neighbors, but obviously presented a zoning issue for the county because restaurants are not typically allowed in your residential districts. So the county kind of kicked this off, and we were kind of watching with interest what happened with this rezoning case. And then because we've kind of gotten a better kind of regional working group on some of these topics, all the planners kind of started talking about this and looking at what is kind of going on with food trucks right now and how are other people addressing this. I know just in the couple that I follow on Facebook, we do have some that are going into subdivisions here in the city and the county, serving food in these residential neighborhoods, which from the pandemic standpoint, is a great way to reach their customers when they don't have the ability to set up in some of the locations that they frequented before. So locally, no one has regulations on the books, and locally I mean really right here in our Northeast Tennessee region, to address food trucks in residential areas. The Bristol, Tennessee zoning ordinance allows food trucks in commercial areas, and they do so, the zoning ordinance allows these with the stipulations on the screen. So they're allowed on commercially zoned private property. The owner has given written permission to the property owner. They obtain all the licenses and permits they're supposed to, and they're removed from the permitted premises between certain hours. But we don't have anything that addresses food trucks in residential areas. What we provided to you in the packet was a sample of some of the other cities, what Johnson City and Kingsport does, which I think is kind of similar to our approach currently. Brentwood does allow food trucks in residential areas, but only at events sponsored by homeowners associations or special events approved by their planning commission. Knoxville has some kind of narrowly tailored ability to let food trucks in residential areas. And then the one that's kind of interesting is Asheville, which is on the back page of this little section that was included in your packet. They actually included operations of mobile food vendors within residential areas as part of their kind of state of emergency plans. So they allowed them out into neighborhoods, but they put some restrictions on them that they can't have tables. They have to leave their trucks in a staging area at night. They have to have consent of the owner. Some of the others we looked at out in communities kind of out west or in different places, they would have stipulations on them that they can't play music. So there's a lot of things to consider if you start thinking about food trucks in residential areas. But we're just trying to see what's out there and learn what others are doing, but wanted to bring this to the Planning Commission to get your input as well.
I think one simple question to me right now is, do you all, under certain circumstances or certain guidelines, would you all feel comfortable entertaining mobile vending units in residential areas? Would be my first question to ask the Planning Commission.
I'd say yes.
Well, I have a question first, and then I'll respond. So, Tim and Cherith, can you explain to me what the difference between a food truck and an ice cream truck, and then a Kona ice truck? Are there very vague differences? Are there minor differences, major differences, and how they operate?
Well, I think if they're stop and set up, they would all fall under our regulation as you see it on the screen.
Okay.
If they physically stop and set up, like I'm going to stay here from X hours during the day. Now, Danielle, you can help me on the ones that drive around and with the ice cream and blare the little kiddie music, and the kids come out and pay them on the street, and then they move on. Real quick transaction.
Well, just for background, at some point in the last 10 years or so, and Margaret may remember this better than I, she would remember it as opposed to me, I just know about it. The city had a program for having food trucks in public rights of way. So right now there's already a section of the city code that says that the city manager can issue regulations regarding food trucks in the public right of way, like on roads and in parks. And I think the downtown center was the pilot program for that. And ice cream trucks, as I recall, were not included because they were selling a food that was already prepared.
Okay.
And so there was no preparation going on. And I think those food trucks the food truck regulations were really aimed at a truck that has the self-contained cooking apparatus in the truck, as opposed to just a freezer where you would pull out an ice cream cone and maybe unwrap it and hand it to somebody.
Okay, so there would be a distinction between a Kona ice truck and an ice cream truck then?
There could be. I think that those regulations in the past did have that kind of distinction. So if you're going to come up with a new regulation, then you could probably distinguish somehow between those. What are they actually preparing? And if it's just shaved ice, maybe that's not a food truck. That's a vendor of some kind.
Okay. All right. Then my answer is I follow Margaret's answer of yes, but I think we need to clarify all these kind of different services offered per truck moving forward.
Yeah, I got a follow-up question for you, Danielle. I had the same confusion here. I mean, what's to prevent somebody from just driving through the neighborhood, parking on the side street for an hour and serving lunch?
Health department regulations would probably be the first part.
But the health department regulates the truck, not. I mean, you take it, you leave, right? I mean, that's. Right. So that's where I'm trying to understand here is, I mean, what I think I'm understanding is people want to actually park this in their yard and do that. I kind of have a problem with versus, they're driving through, they park, I don't know, I live across from Barker Park. They park on the side of the street. People can walk up for whatever the 2-3 hours during lunch and then they leave. I mean, that I don't have a problem with, but I'd also fail to understand where that comes into zoning. So I would definitely have a problem saying, yeah, sure, people can just park a truck on a vacant lot for X number of days. And I mean, that doesn't make sense. But so help me understand what prevents them from just driving around, parking on the street, because it is a public right of way, and selling their food for a couple hours?
Well, right now, the city code talks about the authorization by the city manager to make rules for using the public right of way for mobile food vending establishments. And right now there aren't really any rules in place, but I think we could argue that because we don't have those rules, you are not allowed to just sit in your car on a public street in your parking space and serve food from it.
Well, just why not? I mean, if there aren't rules, that doesn't mean you can't. It just means there aren't rules, right?
I'd try that argument, Scott. I mean, I don't know how successful it is, but the zoning question is whether you want to allow the use of a food truck in the residential zones. So I think there's a distinction between a food truck that's going into a residential zone and parking in someone's driveway and serving the neighborhood. It may be regulated differently from a food truck that's parking on the public street, just because of the way that the existing city code deals with those mobile food vending establishments versus how the zoning ordinance does.
So for reasons other than the food truck issue, I watched the 4.5 hour meeting. I think it was 5.5 hour 24 member county commission meeting when this was brought up. And I don't have the context that Dr. Webb has as a member of the county planning commission, but I do have the context of what was brought up. And my understanding was that the owner of the food truck was operating off of her property where she parks the vehicle through the week and on the weekends perhaps. And that was considered a violation of the zoning that she had in a residential zone. And they wanted to accommodate her by rezoning her property to a commercial zone. And that was what was before the county commission. I can tell you that they discussed that single issue exponentially longer than they did the budget for the county. It brought up a lot of it brought up a lot of consternation and a lot of disagreement and opposition to the concept of telling this lady that was the operator of this vehicle. And so they didn't take any action. They tabled the matter for further consideration to find a solution that would prevent her or not require her to rezone her property in order to operate that food truck. Having said all that, I share that with you, Scott, maybe to provide a little bit more context to why this has been brought up. But and I can say that I don't think there was a single member of the 24 commission that was in favor of regulating or requiring or prohibiting the use of this food truck in that residential zone. Obviously, a political decision in some regards. But in looking at what staff has prepared for us as examples, I kind of see bits and pieces of each part of this. I like what Brentwood does as far as homeowners association requiring approval, and if there's a homeowners association, obviously some of the restrictions we have as far as hours of operation. I have some of the same concerns that other members have as far as what food trucks, how do you define a food truck and what's permitted, and I'd like to see that. But I think in general, the public has garnered more favor for food trucks in general. And I can say I have been to food trucks in the city limits of Bristol and neighborhoods over the past 6 months that were probably not in compliance with the zoning code. But you have to stand in line when you go. And I've really not heard any complaints or issues. I can see where some could develop without the right controls and restrictions for going into the residential zones. But I am personally in favor of adopting an ordinance that would permit it, at least for the short term as we go through COVID.
And if I could clarify my response, I mean, Scott, if we're talking about the specific instance of someone parking their car on the street, that would probably get a response. But, I think we all know there have been food trucks in residential zones all over the city this summer, including in my neighborhood. And I don't think the city has taken any action to prevent that or I just don't think it's been an issue so far. And
I mean, to me, the whole point of a food truck is it's mobile, it moves, it's temporary. What this sounds like is an end run around establishing a restaurant in a residential neighborhood and just saying, well, I have a food truck. I mean, it it essentially becomes permanent.
Did I chime in here a little bit? This was
go ahead, Mark.
This was brought to, like Daniel said, to the County Planning Commission for a rezoning request. Okay, this particular food truck was parked because of COVID. They weren't allowed to go out, and that's what they were used to doing, was moving the vehicle from place to place and setting up an establishment to serve food. Of course, it got taken home, and it was the location of it is close to a couple of campgrounds on South Holston Lake. So people started coming up to them and wanting food as it was parked in the R1 area. Well, that did not work. So they came to County Planning Commission to get a adequate zone where they could leave the vehicle there in the R1 and still, you know, and to be able to open up their business. Well, that was, you talk about spot zoning, that was spot zoning right there. So the Planning Commission, County Commission turned it down, but they went on with it to the, what Jason referred to, that 5.5 hour discussion. And unfortunately, they couldn't come to a conclusion either. They sent it back to Planning Commission to try to come up with some way to make it work. Well, we discussed it for another hour and could not make it work. Finally decided, hey, this is one instance that could open up a can of worms for the whole county. Has there been any other requests like this? No. So Planning Commission left it to be just like the request wasn't there. We couldn't change it. We couldn't come up with any alternatives. And so it was sent back to County Commission that way.
Yeah.
So,
I feel, go ahead, Scott.
I mean, just to finalize my point, I don't see how parking my truck in my yard is any different than me selling food out the side window. Of my house. I mean, I don't understand that. I mean, that just because it's a truck, but it's permanent, doesn't really change the character of what you're doing. You're establishing a restaurant on those premises. I mean, and that's why I was trying to ask Danielle. I mean, because if they drive through the neighborhood, park for a couple hours and sell, I don't have a problem with that because it's temporary. You know, but to say, well, we want to allow people to park a truck semi-permanently. That's just, I don't know. It feels like an end run around the zoning ordinance just because you have a food truck, which is popular.
I think the scenario you're suggesting would actually be covered under our home occupation ordinance. Would it not, Sheriff?
Yeah, and I guess too, I mean, I started this with saying this is kind of what brought it to light and brought it to attention is what was happening in Sullivan County. But I don't think we have anything like that here, but it did make us start looking at it and talking about it. And we do know that we do have the temporary use of food trucks in neighborhoods where, you know, I might say, hey, come park in my driveway Friday night, neighbors, everybody come over and, you know, order food. It'll be a great time. We just don't have anything that covers that. And I think
we have a problem with it. We don't have a problem right now, do we?
I don't think anybody's had a problem. I've not heard of a problem, but I think it's like what maybe Jason said. You know, it's not a problem till it is, and you can see where there could be some problems with, you know, if a neighbor doesn't like that and starts complaining with, be it noise, trash, crowd, tables.
Do our regs allow for for lack of a better word, a food truck or food trailer to be conducting business in a residential area right now?
No.
We don't have anything like that. The only thing we have is related to commercially zoned property.
That's what you see on your screen. That's the only reg we have, and it's limited to commercially zoned private property.
Has that reg caused a problem with anybody?
It has not, but we are seeing in the past months, and it may have been before then, but it has come to light that there are people, you know, putting food trucks temporarily in residential zones, you know, be it at the invite of a homeowners association or a block of people or an individual. And our regs currently do not allow that. And we just want to see if, once again, to go back to the most simplistic I can get it is, if it's a temporary, not a permanent, Scott, but just if they come and do it for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever, temporary, and move on at the end of that time period, would Planning Commission entertain us crafting regulations allowing that or not? I mean, we're not pushing one way or the other as a staff. We just know that it's happening, and that, like I said, at some point somebody does complain, and then our regs do not allow it. So it's trying to be proactive, seeing what is going on in the food truck industry, is trying to get a little proactive, something going on from a city standpoint and how they feel about food trucks and residential. That's the first one, food trucks in residential areas. So
I feel what we have is adequate, my personal opinion. I think it opens up too many other potential issues going forward. If I'm a beer vendor and I've got a license to sell beer out of a trailer, can I come to a neighborhood and set up and sell beer? I think it just opens us up to too much or too many potential issues.
I want to say I'm not in favor of what Scott was kind of narrating there, which I think was more like a permanent setup on a piece of property somewhere and day in, day out. But and I don't think there's a problem yet. I see there could be a problem. I know of a neighborhood where there was a food truck located. There were several food trucks located on a Friday evening, and one of the residents called the police department to complain about traffic. And of course, I think when you start talking about noise, traffic, nuisance, those are things that are addressed in other sections of city code that can be addressed appropriately based upon those violations. But, you know, we have, and I say we, the city council has relaxed the ability to sell beer and alcohol for home delivery in light of COVID. You know, a lot of provisions for those type of things. And, you know, the other thing about food trucks is they gain popularity. And I think probably COVID, even if COVID were to end tomorrow, the familiarity with food trucks has increased so much in the last 6 months. I'm aware of people having parties, birthday parties, events where a food truck is invited to their home and it's set up for a couple of hours to sell food instead of them having a cookout. I really don't see a big difference between, you know, somebody going and buying, you know, 50 hot dogs or 50 hamburgers and grilling them out at home, or you know, somebody hiring a food truck to come out and do basically the same thing. So I'm in favor if it's needed. I don't know that it is needed. I kind of understand what Dr. Webb is saying, but if it is needed, I'm in favor of what seems to be what the majority of the people in our area want to have, because I've seen it happen, and allow business to thrive in a very difficult time during COVID-19.
Can I jump in? I think a couple of things. One is we could do something that's temporary for COVID. And so we get to evaluate it, et cetera. The other is I see it as possible prevention, that if we do actively address it, then we don't get in the same situation as the county, which we might be, maybe it becomes less political and not as difficult to deal with telling somebody they can't do something. But since city tends to have more regulations for land use, et cetera, than the county does. Anyway, but if we addressed it and said, you know, this is what you can do, this is what you can't. So if you own your food truck, you cannot use that on your property on a daily basis. This is the purpose is, going back to that purpose, is for that movement around and offering different things. Anyway, I think it would be good to try it and see what we could come up with, and perhaps have it for X amount of time. We don't know what our COVID time is at this point, if there is ever going to be a non-COVID time, but that's what I would, yeah, really, Kevin, don't laugh. Anyway, and also I think as we look about who do we want to be as a community, and how do we want to be perceived? And I think food trucks are trendy. I think it's a positive thing. It's also, we want to be entrepreneurial. Certainly food trucks are entrepreneurial. We've also seen we lack some in our selections of ethnic foods, and some of the food trucks are answering that desire. So anyway, that's it.
Well, I've got a question.
Okay, go ahead.
On number 4, it says that they're to be removed off premises between 10 and 6. Is that being enforced?
You're muted.
Certainly, currently I know there's one on the Parkway we've got to look at, and that's why we're also looking at the regs more in the commercial zones too, and what do we do there. But like I said, there's more to it than just the residential side that we want to look at. We also want to look at the commercial side, and do we need to tweak the regs on the commercial side of it. But like I said, I think if we feel like the residential piece, that's a piece we can work on, and at the same time we're looking at commercial. We just hadn't talked about the commercial side yet. But no, I mean, there's certainly things that have gone on with food trucks that I think, as they have proliferated in use, that our reg has not stayed up with the times. I think it does need some tweaking and correcting. And but the biggest piece we see right now, the hardest piece for us is to gauge whether y'all want to open it up to residential areas. The commercial, we can tweak and talk about the different setups. Do they need to break down at night or not? That's, to me, that's an easier question to resolve than the big hurdle is residential, and we've seen them in our residential areas. Do we want to open the regulation up to allow them to do something in residential areas, be it on an unoccupied property, on a common area, like some residences have, let's say Middlebrook or somewhere, they have clubhouses or pool areas or things like that.
Or cul-de-sac or
cul-de-sac, Well, that's our first gauge is, do you all want us to look at trying to tweak something to craft toward a residential area?
My personal feeling is you don't have a choice. The reason I say that is the birthday party that Jason was making reference to, or be it the neighborhood party in the cul-de-sac, whatever, somebody's going to object to it, and they're going to call the police department. Now the police shows up. Now we put our police department in bad shape. What are they going to do? Are they going to break it down? Are they going to send them off? They need guidance also, and it would only come from an ordinance.
Yeah, but it doesn't come from the zoning ordinance. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if somebody put up a bounce house on their yard for a party, and somebody complains, it's not a permanent structure. This is where I'm confused about why are we talking about this in the zoning ordinance if it's not permanent? If it's a temporary thing where it comes and goes, then this isn't the place for dealing with it. I think it's in other parts of the city's ordinance. We don't regulate temporary structures other than to say they're temporary. You don't have to get a building permit to put up a temporary structure. I'm kind of lost here about why we're looking at this with zoning.
Scott, this whole thing came about with the county because these particular people wanted to locate their food truck permanently
Yes.
Your property.
Yes, that's my point. Permanently, no. I mean, but I mean, that's where we're confusing things. I mean, I've heard just about everybody say, no, permanent, no. But you want to have somebody come to your house and do it for a party. Well, this is a huge problem and we have to address it with zoning. I don't understand that, because that's a temporary thing.
That's something staff could look into.
Yeah.
And Danielle, and she can weigh in here too, but I think the reason it shows up in the zoning ordinance right now is because it's an allowed use in commercial zones. That, wouldn't that be correct, Danielle?
That's, yes. I mean, I think for the short answer is it's in the zoning ordinance now because that's how
we did it.
How we did it back in 2010 or 2012 when this made it into the zoning ordinance. I don't think it has to be in the zoning ordinance. I think it could be addressed in another part of city code, or, you know, there are aspects of it that do belong in the zoning ordinance. Maybe if it's, and if there are more permanent uses that go along with the food trucks, you know, such as allowing people to park those food trucks in their driveway overnight. If they're, you know, if they have a food truck and they live in the city of Bristol, can they park it in their driveway, not serving food? Yeah, but those are things that actually are not really. I'm not even sure that's a clear yes answer, Scott, because we've got provisions in the zoning ordinance that say you can't park a truck that weighs more than 1.5 tons. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah.
something
So
like that.
it's probably, there's a little bit of an there's a lot of different ways you can address this. We're talking about zoning now because that's how they chose to address it years ago.
Yeah, no, look, I understand about parking overnight. That is a totally different thing than what we're talking about, right? I mean, we're talking about using it in operation. And so, I mean, again, unless you're talking about setting it up permanently in your driveway, which is what this situation wanted to do, I'm totally against that. Because that to me is just an end run around setting up a business at your house. I mean, as somebody said, you can just I could roll out my grill and start serving food. I mean, I don't see how that's any different other than it's a trendy truck. And, you know, but again, if we're talking about temporary, I just, anyway, yeah, I said it.
We're back into the temporary. We're back in the definition land. What's temporary? If I take my food truck and I roll it around the block twice a day, is it temporary versus it sitting on four wheels in the same spot for 24, 48, 10, 12 hours? And I think that's why we need to probably, as Tim said, address some of these things that are coming about as a result of the propensity and the more frequent use of food trucks and the locations they're used.
And Scott, it may be when we look at the regs and look at the neighbors around us and other cities that it does get pulled out of the zoning ordinance portions of it. But obviously at a minimum, if it gets pulled out, we'll have to change the zoning ordinance as written to take it out of. But, so that's one reason it will come back in front of you all at some point, should you all feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think this belongs in the business section of the ordinances, not in zoning.
So, but my first gauge to everybody, in case in case we did conclude that it needed to be in the zoning regs, is do you all have some appetite for looking at a residential reg for food vending? And I think the majority of y'all somewhat around the different ways that you all have spoken about it have indicated, yes, we probably ought to try to wrap our hands around something. Because I just think it's, like I said, it's trying to be more proactive instead of reactive to things, and putting staff or police in a situation that, you know, something that we could have been looking at and trying to be proactive at. So,
Tim, I have a quick question. So, and this kind of follows Scott's logic here. I mean, I kind of see his point, but so what would happen if a caterer was selling out, like he said, if a caterer was selling out of their house temporarily, or just moving around mobile? I mean, what kind of impunity, or we have address it.
We have a home occupation permit that's required for businesses, and there are There are requirements in there that they're I'd have to read it, but there are requirements about customers and use and types. Then you're probably somewhat more familiar.
But that's under zoning, correct?
Yes. The home
Part of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
So like if you have a home office or, I mean, there are guidelines in there and requirements for deliveries and things like that on the home occupations. And without reading that reg right now, but it is in your zoning ordinance, you can look it up and it'll list all those requirements.
The big parts of that, the big home occupation items are that you can't have signage and you can't generate traffic to your house. So you can't have customers come into your house to pick things up.
Sheriff, does it limit? Does it limit the kinds of occupancies or occupations that can occur at home? I may be thinking of something else.
No, but it limits the size, so it can't take up more than X amount of your home. It limits employees. So there are several. I mean, there's quite a laundry list of things that you
requires parking ability.
No, there's no. It's section 2 or.
I thought that you had to have.
It's on page 2-52 of your zoning regs.
Margaret, the parking has to be on the premises. You can't use somebody else's premises parking for the business.
Right.
And there's a whole, if y'all, like I said, pull out your zoning regs and we can shoot that to you all to just, so that way you won't have to go pull out your zoning reg if you don't want to, but it is about a page and 3/4 of information on home occupation permits.
Yeah, but the key one is section 222, number 3D. No goods or services of any kind shall be sold or transferred to a customer, consumer, or client on the premises of the home occupation. There should be no retail transactions on the premises. So again, by saying, well, sure, we can allow food trucks, I mean, that's just an end run around this. That's the way I look at it. Again, if it's permanent, I mean, temporary, I mean, I think temporary can go into the business ordinance and you can address it there. You know, we just don't really regulate temporary things in the zoning ordinance.
And certainly that's what we'll, you know, like I said, I feel comfortable enough to say, yes, there's some update to this regulation needs to occur, and that we'll work on those, and we'll work with staff and figure out the best place for it to be, zoning, city code, or combination based on the criteria. That was in general. And then Joel, to your point, you know, we're going to look at the commercial side piece of that to see if there's tweaks that need to occur to the commercial side for the food trucks. So we just wanted to gauge feedback, trying to be proactive because they have, due to COVID, or it's just the type of business. I mean, you go to the beach or other places, you see on vacant lots, permanent sets up of food trucks, and people parked everywhere and lined up everywhere. And it's very interesting how food trucks have started spreading out through the country, and especially during the current health crisis. So we're just trying to be a little more proactive. And I know Mark and Malin and whoever else sat through all those Sullivan County meetings. Certainly it was a different topic about rezoning a property for a food truck, but it involved the food truck in a residential area. So it's very interesting. So we're just trying to be proactive and trying to gauge, should it come back to you all for any need, to gauge your feelings on it. So I think with that, we have enough on food trucks. Sheriff, do you think to start looking at developing something? So appreciate everybody's input on food trucks there.
Thank you very much. The next item, discussion, housing study zoning ordinance. So I guess we'll pick that up again.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. we did complete the housing study and did give a update to it to City Council, and it's the August update. And in that, there was a Chapter 5 added, and it really looked at incentives and possible actionable items to encourage residential development to happen in the city of Bristol. There were several bullet points that outline actionable items that talked about the zoning regulations. And I think for tonight, the main thing would be to let Sheriff run through these these bullet points, and you all be thinking about these bullet points of what you might entertain or want to entertain, if anything, regarding zoning regulations. And with that, Sheriff, I'll let you talk bullet points here.
Right. So I'll just quickly go through this list. And this is included, we see all the Chapter 5 of the housing study, which was written this summer, which is kind of the action items for 2020 that City Council is considering or considered. And there were several different types of actions, but one related to zoning items, and that is this list here. We just pulled the action items out to present to you all, just to be thinking about, as Tim said, moving forward as some opportunities to either increase or to increase opportunities for housing in the city. So the first one is to allow for the rental of accessory dwelling units. I think we've talked about this some before, but you're allowed in residential zones to build accessory dwelling units that can be used as an extension of your own home. So you can have family members stay in it, guests stay in it, but you cannot rent them. So there's no commercial activity that is allowed to go on with accessory dwelling units. And this may not be appropriate in all zones. It may be appropriate in some and not in others, but something to consider as a way to increase opportunity for just a different type of housing unit, and sometimes maybe in a more affordable type of housing unit, is to allow people to rent these accessory structures on their property. The second one I know we've talked about, it's been some months ago, is to amend the definition of multifamily unit. Right now, if you build a multifamily unit in the city of Bristol, has to be 3 units in a single building. So like what we looked at tonight was 4 clusters, 4 buildings, which had 3+ units in it. Occasionally we have people come to us with kind of a patio home type development where they want to do multiple units, but they don't necessarily always want to connect them. So they could be considered a multifamily project. But our definition stipulates that 3 units have to be in the same building. So that's not always desirable for some of the developers that have approached the city in the past. So that's something we could consider working through or talking with the Planning Commission about, to kind of allow something a little bit more creative to happen. So the third one is to allow the adaptive reuse of vacant institutional properties, such as churches and schools that are located in residential neighborhoods. We do have a couple of properties around town that are large. They're sitting in the middle of a neighborhood, but they're currently limited to whatever the density is in that neighborhood. So it might be a huge structure that could be redeveloped into like lofts or some sort of apartments, but because they're located in an R2 zone, their maximum density is 2 units. So there's no real potential or necessarily desire or economic benefit to considering developing those for residential use because the density allowed is so low. The 4th item on this list is to consider increasing density in the B3 and PBD zones. So right now, and y'all looked at a project tonight, the maximum density in B3 is 15 units per acre. If you remember when Lavender Lane was built, that was built at 13 units an acre. The first phase was, and then for the second phase, the Planning Commission did increase that B3 density to 15 units per acre. And then the Stafford Street complex is built at 15 units per acre. But given the interest in multi-family projects, something we could consider is looking at if bumping up that density a little bit in the business zones might be appropriate. And then the final item is to revise the planned residential district. So there is a planned residential district identified in the zoning ordinance. I think there's one property in the city that has this zoning on it, so there's not a lot of it. It's kind of it's a different animal. It has some pretty complicated density calculations and how you can figure out how many units you can place on a PRD zone property. It has some ability to do some mixed use, so you can have some business in the PRD zone, but it's a little complicated, and I haven't seen anybody request it or ask about it or anything like that in my time here in the city. So a possible consideration is to look at that planned residential district and see how we can possibly amend it to be a more useful tool to developing some creative residential projects. So those are some items, those are the zoning items included in that housing chapter that City Council has worked hard on all summer. And we would, if you all are agreeable to it, at some point bring back some more information on these topics to consider working through it with the Planning Commission.
Thoughts?
I'll say yes, but I'm on city council, and we came up with some of this. So,
in that third bullet there, reuse of vacant institutional properties. I think you're thinking about maybe turning in an old school or an old church into apartment uses. Is that correct?
That's just one of the questions we get at times. You know, we've got some big buildings that are around town that people consider adapting to residential projects, but once they hear they can only turn it into 2 units. Or
would it also include maybe turning one of like a church into a restaurant in the neighborhood area? Is that considered with this what we're discussing? Or is it only just residential?
So this what we're talking about right now has come out of the housing study, so it's kind of residentially focused. But I mean, I'd say if the Planning Commission is interested in that, we could certainly
I just
talk
know,
about that as part of it.
You know, Jonesboro used to have a beautiful old church they turned into a restaurant, you know, right on the edge of a residential area. So I didn't know.
Parsons Table.
Pardon?
It was called the Parsons Table.
That's it. Yep. And they had the Widow Browns right behind it.
Pittsburgh has Church Brew Works. It's really weird drinking beer and eating food at the altar where it used to be, especially as a Catholic. It's strange.
I think
whatever happened to Rosemont School? Did it ever get reused for anything?
It's sitting empty.
I just sold this past Friday to a different owner. So they have
really?
a couple of times and spoken with us a couple of times on it, but nothing in the works that we're aware of.
No proposed use. Okay.
Well,
But this, what we, you know, the item in the housing study, what I was looking at is, like Sheriff said, when you see like it's in an R1A, R district, you can only do single family units. It's in R2 district, you can do duplexes. So these big buildings go underutilized or torn down ultimately. And, you know, to entertain something like more of a multifamily, maybe be at a lower density than your R3, or maybe daycare without a special use or with a special use in them, or community center. Not a city-owned community center, but a neighborhood-owned community center and things like that. That's possible adaptive reuses. Otherwise, they're just going to sit there, and at some point, somebody's going to get tired of trying to figure out what to do with them, and ultimately they'll just be torn down as they, because people won't put maintenance effort into them. So.
Yeah, the example locally would be the Douglas School apartments on the Virginia side at Euclid and Martin Luther King intersection there. Or not Euclid. Yeah, the other one.
Lee Highway.
Lee Highway. Yeah, thank you.
I think if you're doing something like that with Rosemont, you're bordering on spot zoning, though.
You're muted.
All right.
Tim.
What else do you... Hey, Tim, we can't hear you.
I don't think, gosh, hitting the mute button too much. I think what we would do is look at the allowed uses in the zones for institutional, like these adaptive reuses, to allow them by special use or something in those zones that would come back before the planning commission, and not just carte blanche. You can't do anything with them because you're in the R1 zone or R1B or R2. So it would still fall under that specific zone, but it would be by special use would be something I would recommend to look at. That's just one thought. I mean, it's just throwing it out there, but I think it would be, otherwise they're just going to ultimately just sit there, and at some point somebody's going to have to deal with them as far as abandoned structures. Because I mean, we're fortunate Rosemont sold. I hope the new owners come up with some ideas that are allowed in our current zoning, but it'd be nice to see if there is some use we can get out of that structure.
What else do you want from us tonight on this?
We just really want you all to look at the list, and we'll start picking off one or two at a time, or one at a time, to bring back to you all. I know it's a lot on the plate. We can't do a ton of this stuff every night, or we'll have to have 2 or 3 planning commission meetings a month, but we will like pick off some easy ones maybe to talk about, one at each meeting or something. We'll figure out based on the workload at the meetings what we feel we can start discussing.
All right.
Sounds like you all are amenable to that, so we'll start working on that.
All right. Special use permit explorations.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you all had requested previously to look at expiration dates for special use permits. And Danielle, if you want to chime in on this one here, start and let them know what you have done. And it's highlighted in red in your packet, but Danielle can give that information to you.
Yes, Tim. I think what the Planning Commission, and I apologize because it's been a few months since we started working on this, and Tim and Sheriff and I have had some discussions internally, and then there's been so much other stuff that has gone before Planning Commission that this has, like I say, it's taken a while to get this back before you. But your concern initially was that when you grant a special use permit, it basically is there forever. And then what happens if someone else comes along who wants to develop the property referencing the special use permit, but doesn't necessarily want to do the same project that you all approved when you granted the special use permit. And so the goal I think that Planning Commission had was to build in some kind of sunsetting provision so that there wouldn't be that danger of the special use permit hanging out there, so that anything that does happen would come back before the Planning Commission for review. We did find examples of other cities, and we shared those with you, I think, back in when we talked about this in the spring, who had sunset provisions like this. And we took your feedback and put it into a regulation that's on the screen right now. 9, 10, and 11 are new sections of the special use permit language. So you've been provided with all of it. And we would really just be adding these 3 sections. One thing that Sheriff and I talked about, and one reason why it's highlighted, is that it's a little bit of a tricky concept, is that what we've said is that if the special use permit hasn't been, the term we've used is implemented. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but if the special use permit hasn't been implemented within 24 months of its final approval, then it's void. Then we tried to insert a definition of implement, which means a site plan has been approved or a building permit's been issued that would keep the special use permit alive. So we're opening this up for discussion to see what your take on this is, if this is something that you want to move forward with, or if you have additional changes or where you'd like to go.
Y'all thoughts?
We did want to do it, so I think looking at the verbiage, see if it does what we wanted.
Good, I like it.
I have felt for some time that we needed something like this, because when we issue a special use permit, we look at a project. This is an example where we can look at a project. Rezoning, we can't, but we can look at a project and we go, yeah, we can live with that. And then it doesn't happen. And then somebody else will use that special use permit for not what we agreed to. That's why I think we really need to have this. So I'm all in favor of it.
Yep. I agree.
Yep, I agree too.
Unless there's any tweaks needed in the language, are you going to bring it to us next month for something to vote on?
Yes, we'll look at the language and make sure, and we'll talk further as staff about the definition of implement, if that's the right word, or if there's something else we feel is better. But we'll bring back an actionable item next month for you all to look at.
So we frequently, I know y'all do it even more, look at other communities. Are other places sunsetting special use permits also, or?
There were some. I think I was able to come up with maybe 4 or 5 other communities that had similar, and I think Sullivan County, even if I'm not mistaken, had something. Now that I've said this, I may need to go back and pull out my research, but I want to say that there was language in in their zoning ordinance that addressed this. So
great.
It's not unheard of.
Great.
And what we can do is a homework assignment for us and to give you all part of the next planning commission packets is pull that table back out and send to you all about what Danielle and Sheriff found on sunsetting special use permits.
Excellent. Anybody else with a comment? Because we still have a couple of things to discuss. Training update.
Y'all have this training sheet. It might be updated through the time we printed it and put it out to you all, but please make sure you get your required hours in. One request we have is you will get the property rights training in December. I would assume you all would want to do a work session before the planning commission meeting in December to have that training, starting at 5. But if you have any specific property rights, and Danielle, you can help me here since you're the one who puts it on, but if y'all have any specific topics about property rights that you would like Danielle to discuss and look at as far as your training, it would certainly be good to get those from you all within the next couple of weeks so she can start crafting that training program.
So Tim, can you check with our attorney and see if there's any problems recording that session in case somebody can't attend and absolutely needs that to.
I don't have a problem recording those trainings. And I think actually it would be great to broadcast it so that people can, I mean, maybe we will still be in Zoom land at that point.
Right.
So
that's what I figured. Right.
I'm happy to do a broad training if that's what you guys would like to do.
But if we're not on Zoom, we can get work with community relations to get that recorded, that session.
Mm-hmm. And the training requirement for planning commission, I don't think there's there's nothing in there that says it has to be live training or in-person training. It's just training on the subjects.
So make sure, other than that, we have to have 1 hour on property rights, but make sure to get your other 3 hours in as a minimum. And some of y'all have gone way good here. So But
Some
it's
of
not
us
like
have
a lot
one.
of trainings, they don't carry over to next year. So anyway, but keep up the good work, and just as you train, let us know so we can keep track of it on this sheet. It is very important, and I know council has placed an emphasis on training in the past 30 to 60 days and making sure everybody adheres and gets their required training. So just use the sheet, look at the opportunities on the bottom, and Sheriff, as other opportunities come around, she emails, staff has been good about emailing those out to you all. And if you need a list of some of the online stuff still, we can resend that. But anyway, if y'all just make sure, like I said, by the end of the year, we have to have the 3 hours of non-property rights and 1 hour of property rights. So for a total of 4 as a minimum. So anyway, appreciate y'all checking up on that.
Let me ask this question. As part of that 1 hour, can we discuss during that hour what we can and cannot discuss during a rezoning hearing? Would that be appropriate?
We could probably, I think that's probably, we could shoehorn that into the topic of private property rights, sure. Because zoning affects private property, so I'm kind of making a joke there when I say we could shoehorn it in. That could be a topic of private property rights training.
Short version of a long story, I had to attend another planning commission meeting in another city. They brought up a rezone and they just sat around and just talked about what they were going to do and et cetera, and et cetera. And it was everything that we've been trained not to do.
Well, we'll go through some of that stuff.
I think it'd be wise. All right. So that's everything that's on the agenda there. So the meeting will go back to our work session now.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, let me, we'll call the, let me recall up this screen again here. Just bear with me one moment.
Tim, I don't know why I'm on the screen, but you can take me off anytime.
You're probably the last one may have talked. I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I'm getting there. I got to get my cursor over on the other screen here. There it is. Okay, let me grab something here and pull it off. Does everybody see that? The opening slide about work session again?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move on down to, did we get through a setback discussion? I think we did, and we're going to do a range. I think this is the last topic, or somebody help me out, but I think the last topic to discuss, Sheriff, is the front facades. Is that true?
That's true. Yeah, we were down to the one slide forward of just the issue of what is the front facade. And this is in relation to the section that talks about orientation pattern, and where it says that all new structures and front yard additions shall face the same direction as the majority of the residential front facades on the block, and then have a main entrance door in the front facade of the structure. And what we had talked about was, or the previous discussion was, what is needed is just a definition of those terms. So 2 options for consideration is simply just to say that the front facade is the facade of the structure that faces the street once the structure is placed on the lot.
And then the other would obviously be the main entrance door is placed in the front facade and, well, I mean, the main entrance is the door placed in the front facade. I'm sorry, I'll read that correctly here in a second. So any discussion, I think the whole issue of this is with that structure on Pennsylvania Avenue, that it was determined that the facade, the front facade was established at the time of manufacture of the unit. And since it was a manufactured unit, and that it could never be modified if you moved the unit from where it was previously to the lot out there, that the unit could not be modified to have a main entrance door on the side facing Pennsylvania Avenue, because the skinny side, so it could not be modified to have a opening on the skinny side of the structure, since the long side had been established as the front facade as manufactured. And our question is, what do y'all feel? I mean, our question is, how do y'all feel about what front facade should be it a structure moved in from another location, even an existing home that's moved in from another location? Is it possible do you feel comfortable saying that the facade in general, that term means front, front of building? I mean, I think if you go back and look at what facade means in the original language, but do you feel comfortable as the definitions are shown, or do you want more clarity? Do something different, or leave them like they are? I mean, that's questions we have.
I'm satisfied with the definitions of 1 and 2, front facade and main entrance. I think that squares it up.
I think the main entrance door definition is circular. The main entrance door on the front is the door on the front.
Well, it's the door placed in the front facade.
So,
in other words, if you had a door in the side facade and didn't have, I don't know. I mean, it's
the point is who determines whether it's the main entrance door? If you have a door on the street side, that's good enough for me.
Okay. So clarify that definition, just to basically say you need a door on the front facade.
Yeah, if you main entrance does not have a lot of meaning that we could regulate.
Certainly more ambiguous.
And the front is on the front. That's kind of a circular argument as well.
Other input on that?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about, Tim, was a safety issue, like the house we were talking about. If that door on the front really didn't go anywhere, and he was going to have to be using the side door, which would be considered the side door the way it's placed, and he calls 911 and they go to that front door, are they going to be able to get to that front door the way he had it laid out?
We've never really regulated the interior design of homes and the layout of them.
Right.
On residential homes. Now, commercial's a whole different ballgame.
And that's why my argument was that night that you can change the interior of the building, that there's nothing that I know of engineering wise or international building code wise why you cannot change the interior of the building to put that in the front, correct?
You certainly can, change the interior of structures just as long as they meet building code.
Right.
Layout. So even if you stick built one, the structure in question, they could have stick built one there that looked exactly the same.
Like it.
And
Mhm.
the door in the front facade, Kevin, and it would have, it would have looked exactly the same. So yes, I mean, you can change interiors, and we may not even know from a code if you change the interiors layout. I mean, you could go in after the structure's built and change the interior if you do it on the weekend yourself, and we may never even know it as a city.
Well,
We have never
and the
regulated that layout internally to some extent. I mean, there are some measurements that you do have to meet as far as building codes. And
yeah, and the front facade, if some people are saying because of the roof line, well, if they go right down the street, Appalachian Service Projects build them with them facing exactly like that one is facing.
Well, yes, there's no architectural design standards as far as a front facade, what it has to look like in the city. I mean, it doesn't have to be the hip of your roof or the gable facing the street. It doesn't. The roof can be like a more traditional home, just a straight roof down to the street, because we don't have architectural standards for homes. The closest we have in our regs are the definitions is currently placed in the RE about the front facade and the main entrance door is the only design standards, architectural design standards we have for homes as far as the look of a home in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Going back to the issue that was before the BZA and the fact that that was a pre-manufactured home that was located and then modified, I think is the reason for, and probably would be the only future application of the need for a definition of front facade and main entrance door. Normally when you build a house, stick build a house or a dwelling on a lot, you know what the front of the home is, but because that was a pre-manufactured home, which was, as Tim alluded to, the architectural standard or features of that pre-manufactured home, a lot of people determined that the former front facade should continue to be the front facade. And I think the definitions provided by staff for both main entrance door and front facade clarify that issue. But again, I think this is a very limited application and will continue to be a very limited application, although a useful one, because the ramifications of the decision by the BZA has been wide and broad for both the city and for the property owner and the residents of that area.
To kind of move things away from that particular instance, I'm throwing out, I don't know if you've ever been through the front part of Forest Hills where I live, but if you have, you'll find that houses face all over the place because of the way the streets are laid out. So my house faces directly toward the house across the street, but then the house next to the house across the street faces down the hill. And so their front is perpendicular to my front. And so I think that part of this, I think the intent of this language was probably to get to the idea that this is a grid neighborhood. It's laid out in blocks. It's not laid out like a lot of the neighborhoods in the city where, the streets follow the curves of the hills or creeks or anything like that. This one is laid out square. And my personal opinion is that they were trying to maintain that square look so that you didn't have a house that was diagonal to the street. If you could fit such a thing on the lot. And that would be the only other thing I can think of that they were trying to get to with this language.
Well, that's I think, Danielle and members, that is probably their attempt initially at characteristic of the neighborhood would be this definition to try to keep the home where most of those homes, like you said, the majority, 99% of them they are they're parallel to the road. The front facade is parallel to the road and has a door. The door may not physically be straight in off the front facade. There may be a porch and it comes in off the side of the front facade, but there's an offset and a porch or something there. But in general, to keep that look of the neighborhood of these homes don't have a blank wall on the front. There are parallel to the street, and the majority of them have doors or a porch or something in that front of the structure that would lend you to the characteristic of that area. So like I said, I think that was the attempt to do some characteristic of the area, along with, as you all talked about the setback previously, but so.
Is it in the regulation that the lines should be parallel and perpendicular to the street?
It says face the same direction as the majority of the residential front facades. That's the regulation on the left. On the left side of the page is the actual regulation. On the right side is an option to change it. And we don't, and the thing, Kevin, I guess to further answer your question, our regulation does not have a definition for front facade in it. So that is where it came, that is why staff, you look at front facade, which typically if you read definitions, and once again, you go back to the word facade originally without the word front in front of it, it's the part of the building that faces the street. I mean, that's the most definitions for front facade or facade in general, the original word. So we're just trying, and Sheriff, like she said on the right side, their staff had put some definitions to clarify what that means. What is a front facade, since we don't have a definition of that. And then the second part was the door, and it says have a main entrance door in the front facade, but anyway, we can tweak that. But it was just to clarify that one, the front facade is what faces the street. And number two, that there has to be an entrance door in that front facade. And paraphrase it real quick.
Yeah, it worked. I think it works. I just wonder, do we need to go farther and say that the line of the front facade should be parallel with the right of way?
I mean, I think you could leave the same language on the left, face the same direction as the majority of the residential front facades on the block, because that defines your orientation, and just define what front facade is. And you see what I'm saying? And
yeah, we have learned that it's really hard to outguess them now.
Yeah, it is. So, but if you're all comfortable with that, I mean, we can tweak it a little bit more. We just wanted to get something in front of you all. If that's what the majority of y'all feel comfortable with that, then that would be our point to write a regulation around. Scott, any thoughts? Unmute. Yeah.
No, I think defining what the front facade is and then saying the main entrance is a door on the front facade is that kind of does it. I mean, that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Takai, you good? Shake your head. Yes, no, yeah.
I'm good. I think we've beaten a dead horse.
Mark?
Yes. I agree.
Kelly?
I'm
This
good.
time of night, it sounds good.
Okay.
Do we have sandwiches tonight?
You already had them, Kelly.
It was really
You
great.
remember?
Kelly,
You
we're all
could have had
coming
a glass of water, a glass of water. That's what you
The food truck came by here.
I was intrigued by something that Jason said about the beer truck coming by.
With that, that's all we have on RE, and I think we've got enough from you all on RE to craft the regulation for you all to look at.
Kevin will pick that one up next time.
Right. Beer truck has to come down my street.
Well, we're 3 hours and 32 minutes into it. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to put forth tonight?
No, there is not. I'll answer for everyone.
Kevin says no.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night.
Eddie.
Bye.
All right, thank you.